The Elemental Wizard of Hogwarts Chapter 81-100. Chapter 81-Shires, Confinement. Early in the morning, Seal was disturbed by Fox, and the fiery red feathers swept across Seal's nose constantly, and finally, with an incomparably huge wake-up air, Seal was woken up by his own sneeze. Seal, who was confused on the toilet because he woke up early, had three questions in his mind. Who am I? Am I there? What am I going to do? After thinking for a long time, Seal remembered that he was going out with Dumbledore today. So Seal complained that the smokeless toilet throne really had no soul, so he quickly got up to clean up and wash up. After Fox woke up Seal, he flew back from the window. Seal thought with his ass and knew that old Dang was afraid that he would not be able to get up to delay the trip, etc. Shaw vaguely felt that something was not quite right. Why was old Dang so anxious, even sending Fox to provide wake-up service? Seal felt that there were some problems in his heart, but he couldn't say exactly where it was. With a bad premonition, after thinking about it for a long time, Seal decided to bring his own small box, which has everything in it. It is absolutely okay to be in a hurry, so Seal quickly finished his washing, went back to the bedroom and dressed up, and then he ran to the principal's office with his suitcase. I rushed all the way to the gate of the principal's office, and before Seal arrived, the stone statue jumped away after seeing it from a distance, and didn't give Seal a chance to say the password at all, and Seal didn't care, and passed when he was at the stone statue. He politely said a word of thanks to Mr. Stone Statue, and then ran in quickly. The stone statue was a little surprised when he heard what Seal said. He turned to look at Seal, who had disappeared on the spiral staircase. After a slight smile on the corner of his mouth, he became expressionless and motionless, and slowly closed the door. Charles ran all the way to the headmaster's room, and as soon as he entered, he saw Dumbledore standing in front of the table with his back to him, holding a wand and chanting a spell at something. Seal greeted him loudly and without restraint. Dumbledore was not affected by Seal, and after Seal said hello, he just finished reciting the spell, turned to look at Seal, and smiled and said good morning to Seal. Seal ran to the table curiously and looked at a delicate cup on the table. His face suddenly turned pale, and he looked at his teacher tremblingly, with a smile on his face. "Teacher, this is not what I thought. That thing." Dumbledore obviously knew the reason why Seal looked at Seal with a smile. "That's right, that's what you thought." Seal's face became even paler when he heard Dumbledore's words. "Teacher, why don't we ask Fox to do me a favor?" Charles began to look for Fox in the house with a look of licking his dog, but unfortunately, he didn't see it. "I'm sorry Seal, Fox has other things. I was sent out early in the morning. I think we won't be back until we arrive at Fox." Dumbledore still looked at Seal with a smile. "Of course, you have to ignore the mischief and interest in those eyes. Bullying the apprentice or something is really the most interesting. Of course, Seal is not blind." Looking at Dumbledore like an old urchin, Seal has already begun to curse. "What kind of bullshit is the strongest white wizard? White ass, the inside is black when cut, or the kind of black and oily?" Charles kept complaining in his heart, still looking at his teacher with a smile on his face. "So, how about we ride a broom over there? I think that's not bad too." Seal tried to make a final struggle, but unfortunately, Seal failed. "I'm sorry Seal, that would take too long. I don't think my old friend has that much time." After Dumbledore finished smiling, he turned around and took out a book from the shelf and handed it to Seal. "If you have time to practice occlumency, I don't need legilimency to know that you are definitely scolding me. At least contact this to control your expression." Dumbledore looked like he had succeeded in mischief after hearing his own words. Turned into an embarrassed Seal. Seal didn't expect his teacher to be so direct. He was embarrassed that he almost had a house with 3 bedrooms and 1 living room. With an embarrassed smile, he took the book from Dumbledore's hand and put it in his arms. Without waiting for Seal to quibble, Dumbledore then said to Seal, "Okay Seal, it's almost time. Put your hand on the teacup. My old friend has wanted to see you for a long time." Seal wanted to struggle a bit, but seeing Dumbledore's increasingly serious look, Seal clasped his index finger on the handle of the cup with a mortal mood. With an uneasy mood, Seal waited for the time to come, and didn't know if he would travel again if he was thrown off his hands in the middle, and Seal was thinking wildly in his mind. Dumbledore looked at Seal's nervous expression and felt that his student was becoming more and more interesting. Finally, the time came. In an instant, Seal felt that the ground under his feet disappeared. Just as he was about to fall, an invisible hook hooked on the place below his belly button and lifted it up for Seal. Then it started to spin continuously. Up, down, left, right, and left were meaningless at this point. Seal felt dizzy and dizzy. I don't know how long it took, but with a normal sound, Seal and Dumbledore appeared on a meadow. The grass was still full of dew in the morning. Dumbledore was still standing there calmly, but Seal was not so beautiful. It's even a bit irritating to the eyes. I saw Seal lying on the ground in a frustrated posture, retching constantly. Seal even felt like he was about to vomit up the overnight meal, and Seal's small box was also 2 meters away from Seal at this time. Lying quietly on the grass, covered with dew. It can be said that Seal was so upright when he left, how embarrassed he is now. After a long time, Seal grabbed Dumbledore's arm and reluctantly stood up. Looking at Seal's embarrassed appearance, Dumbledore waved his wand twice at Seal with a successful prank on his face. Soon Seal's clothes became clean again, and the vomit on the ground disappeared. Seal walked over slowly, picked up his small box, faced his teacher, gritted his back teeth and said, "Sooner or later I will. To replace these anti-human mobility. Then I'm still looking forward to it. Seriously, wizards haven't innovated their magic for a long time." Dumbledore didn't care about Seal's complaints, and continued, "Come on, I think we should go, good luck. We can even make it to breakfast." Quote. After he finished speaking, he took Seal and started to move forward in a meadow, and soon Seal found that he should be in a countryside, with fields of grass and sparse houses, full of French style. "Teacher, shouldn't we be seeing Nick LeMay?" Charles asked cautiously. "You guessed it right, my good apprentice." Dumbledore also spat out a rare remark about Seal, and then continued with Seal. "I don't know how long I walked, and even led through a mist under the leadership of Dumbledore. An exquisite small house appeared in front of the two. Dumbledore stepped forward and knocked on the door, and soon the door was opened from the inside, and an exquisite doll appeared at the door. "Welcome Mr. Dumbledore, and little Charles, the master is waiting for you in the room." "Thank you, Jenny." Dumbledore thanked him politely, and then walked in with Seal. As soon as he entered the door, Seal was stunned by the sight in front of him. It wasn't that there was something that Seal couldn't understand, but that fiery red figure suddenly turned Seal's face black. "Fox?" Seal asked in a low voice with a dark face. Fox happily tweeted in response to Seal. Seal looked at Dumbledore beside him, his face even darker. Chapter 82-Dying Nicole LeMay. Dumbledore obviously ignored Seal, whose face was blackened, and walked directly to the dining table to sit down. Not long after, an old man appeared. He was really old, walking slowly, but in good spirits. "You're really welcome, Dumbledore." The old man sat down at the dining table and looked at Dumbledore across from him. Dumbledore also picked up the coffee in front of him and took a sip. "It's been a long time, of course I'm familiar with it." The old man shook his head helplessly and turned to look at Charles. "Then I think you must be my old friend's student, isn't it, Charles Lancaster?" Seal nodded cautiously. After all, the old man sitting across from him was a big man who lived for more than 600 years, and Seal didn't know why Dumbledore brought him here, so he seemed extremely nervous. Nicole LeMay also clearly saw Charles's nervousness, and waved his hand with a smile. "Don't be nervous, child, come and sit down. I think you must be wondering why Dumbledore brought you to see me, who is about to enter the coffin. Old antique, isn't it?" Seal couldn't react, so he nodded while sitting at the dining table, and then felt that something was wrong in Nico's words, and quickly shook his head. Seal's performance successfully amused the two old men on the opposite side. "Oh, Seal, I don't think you usually do this, take out your skin." Dumbledore was obviously very happy with Seal's performance, and couldn't help but tease. Charles glared angrily at the old urchin in his house, a little helpless, and then nervously looked at Nicole LeMay opposite, waiting for his next explanation. Nico is also very funny. Obviously, Dumbledore must have mentioned Seal to Nico through letters. Nicole knows a lot of things that Seal is usually naughty and mischievous. The trick-or-treater with the pink bow on Leto's beard is definitely not a good baby. The two laughed for a long time, and then Nico slowly stopped. Looking at Seal, whose face was dark but he was not in trouble, he said happily, Okay, let's get down to business. It's actually very simple. It's just an old man who is about to step into the arms of death, just curious about a natural elemental mage. Nicole LeMay said to Charles with a smile. There was no grief on his face at all, but Seal was still surprised, and looked at Nicole LeMay and Dumbledore in a stunned manner, unable to speak. Words come. Looking at Charles's appearance, Nicole LeMay comforted Charles. Don't be nervous, young man, death is more like a rest for me. 600 years, I've been through too much. You know my wife went to rest before me just yesterday, and she, what can I say, can't wait. At this time, Sha'ur was completely surprised by the old man's words and was speechless. He didn't know how to answer the old man, comfort him. It seemed a little wrong to see Nick happy, but the congratulations were not so harmonious. Seeing Ciel's seemingly intractable expression, the two old men burst into laughter again, and Nick LeMay couldn't help but tease Dumbledore for accepting such a pistachio-like apprentice and giving him the last in the world. The time has added a lot of fun. Of course, Sha'ur, who was the party involved, was extremely embarrassed at this time, so he could only scratch the back of his head, embarrassedly cooperated with the two old men and laughed a few times. Okay, don't bully children, Dumbledore, you are so old, why do you still like to bully children? Nico said directly. Dumbledore directly replied Nico with a big white eye, and with I was my little apprentice just now. Nicole ignored Dumbledore's rolling eyes as a matter of course, and then his face gradually became serious. Okay, let's get to the point. In fact, the ultimate purpose of calling you here is not only to satisfy my curiosity, but also an important one. The problem is to solve your magic problem. Quote. Hearing this, Seal looked at the two old people with some doubts. His own magic problem, why did I never know what magic problem I had? It's a good habit of Seal to ask if he doesn't understand, so he opened his mouth and asked his doubts. It was Dumbledore who answered Ciel's question. Remember the magic you used in your first year? It's not really elemental magic, but how many can you use? But by the end of the summer vacation, you should be able to talk to Grindel. Will you fight for a few minutes? Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal also fell into contemplation. That's right, when he was in the first grade, he was definitely a crispy skin, and he had to lie down for 5 or 6 spells. He even had to come with Voldemort in the end with a wave of swords and magic. But at the end of the summer vacation, under the circumstance that Grindelwald couldn't cut a little bit of water with his dead hands, he could already fight back and forth with the old man. That potion that was drunk. Charles seized the point of the matter and pointed out the key. That's right. That's the magic potion I made with the Philosopher's Stone. How about it? The effect is obvious, Nico said to Seal with a smile. Hearing this, Seal hurriedly stood up and bowed to the old man across from him, expressing his sincere thanks. Seal is indeed grateful to this old man. If it weren't for him, he might not have reached the current level of magic power when he graduated. Seal hadn't discovered it before, but when Dumbledore pointed it out, Seal was surprised to find that his own magic power. The magic power is 5 or 6 times that of the first grade. Nicole LeMay accepted the gift from Charles calmly, and then said happily, Great boy, Dumbledore, you have accepted a good apprentice. If I didn't have much time, maybe I really wanted to. I'll grab it with you. Dumbledore looked at Nick LeMay proudly and did not speak. Nick LeMay saw that Dumbledore was obviously making fun of himself, and didn't say much, looking at Seal and continued. But I'm sorry for Shire, I could have helped you more, but my time is running out, and my wife has already gone to another world before me. I don't want to pull him down too much, so after discussing it with Dumbledore, we decided to change it. After finishing speaking, Nick LeMay ordered the alchemy puppet beside him to go to the laboratory and take out what he had made. Not long after, the doll came back, holding a beautiful small wooden box in his hand, which Nicole LeMay opened and handed to Charles. Charles looked at the contents of the box and was instantly stunned. "Mr. LeMay, I can't take this, it's too precious." The box contained a pair of glasses and a ruby necklace. Spectacled Char doesn't know what it is, but the ruby Char can see it at a glance. Isn't this the magic stone that he and Harry desperately snatched from Voldemort? Chapter 83-Chapter 83 Gifts and Funerals. Nicole May looked at Ciel's refusal and smiled with satisfaction, waved at Ciel and said, "Don't be nervous, kid, this is no longer a magic stone, he is just a stone with huge magic power now." Quote. Charles looked at the old man with some doubts, and asked his doubts, "Mr. LeMay, I don't quite understand. The Philosopher's Stone is actually useless for a long time. In other words, the effect of the medicine is reached, and it is no longer possible to make the elixir of immortality, so he is just a stone full of magic power now." Nick LeMay smiled, explained to Charles. "So you don't have to have any psychological burden, and the death of my wife and I was predetermined. Even if the Philosopher's Stone didn't lose its effect, we would artificially make it useless. 600 years, around this piece too many tragedies have happened to the stone." Quote. Nick LeMay looked a little sad, but quickly reorganized his emotions, and then said, "I don't have much time, so I thought of a compromise solution. This necklace is both an insurance and an amplifier. With it your magic will continue to grow as it did during the summer." Nick LeMay took a sip of coffee and then said to Ciel, "And even if its magic power is gone, he can still be a magic power storage device, allowing you to extract the magic power stored in it in an emergency, which is also considered to be a magic power storage device. One is guaranteed. According to my estimation, this necklace will still be used as an amplifier for 2 years, so you have to hold on to it, little Ciel." Quote. After talking, Nick LeMay drank coffee and stopped talking. Charles looked at the necklace in the box and put it on his neck with both hands solemnly, and then bowed to Nick LeMay for the second time. "Thank you. Your help, M. LeMay, I will surely take to heart." Nick LeMay nodded, looked at Ciel and said happily, "I'm also curious about how far you can go. To be honest, it's the first time I've seen a talent like yours. Just forget to come and see me, the lousy old man." Nick LeMay looked very happy, not like he was talking about his own life and death at all. Ciel nodded, making up his mind to solve the terrorist in the future, and come to see the old man who helped him. Of course, Charles' attention was then attracted by the exquisite glasses in the box, and he picked it up and looked at it with some curiosity. He couldn't help but ask, "Mr. LeMay, what are these glasses?" Nick LeMay seemed to have just remembered the box and a pair of glasses, and exchanged glances with Dumbledore, his eyes filled with mischief, and explained to Ciel. "The glasses are nothing, they only have one function, it is to prevent the sight of the basilisk. Looking directly at the eyes will petrify. If you don't look directly, it is just a simple coma. You can wake up in half a day. I heard Dumbledore say that you have little girlfriend, I think you should need this." When Charles heard Nick LeMay's words, his face turned as red as a monkey's butt, and he glared at Dumbledore, who was snickering while covering his mouth, and then accepted this gift very preciously. Min needs this. Although he still won't get hurt, Ciel didn't want to do anything wrong. Ciel stood up for the third time and bowed to LeMay. LeMay smiled and didn't hide, and then thoughtfully said that the glasses can also prevent myopia, to protect the eyes. Many small functions make Ciel also amazed. After introducing everything, and being greeted by Nick LeMay, after the three of them had a good breakfast, Nick LeMay excused the need to rest and returned to the room. Dumbledore looked at Ciel, who was sitting beside him in deep thought, stood up and came to Ciel and said to Ciel, "Let's go out for a walk." Charles glanced at Dumbledore and got up to keep up with his teacher. The two walked around and came to Nick's garden. The sunflowers in the garden were full of vitality and were swaying slightly in the morning breeze. "Do you know what we are here for?" Dumbledore said to Ciel first, looking into the distance through the sea of flowers, but that trace of sadness could not be hidden. "Teacher, Seal wanted to say, but he didn't dare to say it, so he could only perfunctory Dumbledore. Dumbledore obviously saw Ciel's concerns and didn't care, and took the initiative to speak. Explained. "You guessed it right, Charles, we're here for Nicole May's funeral, it's just the two of us, and Nico doesn't want too many people to know about it." Dumbledore's tone didn't contain much sadness, but there was an indescribable feeling. "Just now, we met Nicole for the last time." Dumbledore said something that stunned Ciel. Ciel was so surprised that he even turned around and was about to rush into the room, but was caught by Dumbledore. Pulling it, Dumbledore shook his head gently at Ciel. "Charles, don't disturb Nick's last time," Dumbledore said softly, and Charles lowered his head in sadness when he heard Dumbledore's words. The laughing old man was about to embrace death now, and Ciel couldn't accept it. Dumbledore obviously knew what Ciel was thinking, and said to Ciel, "Don't be sad about Ciel, death is just a new adventure for us old guys, there's nothing to be sad about, so is Nico. 600 years have left too much on him, and for him it is like finally letting go of everything and resting." Quote. Ciel didn't quite understand what Dumbledore said, and looked at the old man in front of him, his teacher, with some doubts. "There's no doubt about it, Ciel. Longevity is full of temptation for people like Voldemort, but for human beings like us, it's endless pain and torture." Dumbledore paused for a moment, as if he had remembered something, and then said to Charles, "For us, longevity can only be watching our relatives, friends, and lovers grow old, and even our own children leave first. This kind of pain can't be endured by ordinary people, even Nico. If it wasn't for his wife always by his side, I don't think Nico would have been able to last so long." Dumbledore's eyes were full of sadness and guilt, and even his body trembled a little. "And, Charles, you must know that sometimes death is the only way for us to say sorry to those who are wrong." Quote. Looking at Dumbledore's appearance, Charles obviously knew the meaning of Dumbledore's bringing him, and he stepped forward and carefully held the old man's bony hand, comforting the old man. "Teacher, I know what you brought me here, don't worry. Well, I won't go down Voldemort's way, and I think, teacher, I'll make your wish come true, without leaving us." What Ciel said was very firm. At this time, Ciel made up his mind that he would never let those beautiful things disappear from his side because of some noseless people. Ciel swore that he would firmly control his own life in this life. Destiny. Chapter 84 Nicole Mead leaves. When Ciel and Dumbledore went back, Nicolem had closed his eyes quietly on the bed, as if he was asleep. A generation of alchemy giants, the genius alchemist who created the Philosopher's Stone came so plainly. Open the world. According to Nico's last wish, Dumbledore and Ciel arranged for Nico's funeral, and only a few of Nico's students, Dumbledore and Ciel, attended. The remains of the husband and wife were buried at the back of the hut. According to Nico's will, the hut would be donated to his alma mater, Beauxbaton's School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, to be preserved as a site. Several students, Nick, left notes and books for them. Even Ciel, Nick left him some alchemy books and notes for Ciel, but all of them were deposited by Ciel in Dumbledore's hands without exception. It is impossible for Ciel to keep Nick at all. The wealth LeMay left behind, even if the few people present had no intention of robbing it. For the next day, Ciel simply followed Dumbledore to deal with Nicole Mead's death. From time to time, Ciel groped for the necklace that conveyed the warmth and magic power in his clothes. It was the first time that Ciel faced death like this. Emotional, but don't know what to say. Even when Dumbledore took him to Beauxbaton's campus, Ciel was still in a dazed trance. Dumbledore and Madame Maxime obviously knew that Ciel was facing the departure of someone they knew for the first time. It was not until the exchange between the two ended that Dumbledore took Ciel out of Beauxbaton's campus, and Ciel came back to his senses. Seeing Ciel's appearance, Dumbledore said, "How is it? Is it better?" Charles shook his head when he heard Dumbledore's words. "Teacher, in fact, I still can't accept the fact that the people around me are leaving me, even if this is the first time I've met Mr. LeMay." Hearing Ciel's words, Dumbledore smiled helplessly, it doesn't matter, Seal, these are all things that are difficult to accept. Take your time, we are all by your side to accompany you. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal smiled happily, but Dumbledore's next sentence made Seal's good mood just disappear without a trace. Hey, Charles, you don't know, just now in Beauxbatons, many girls looked at you curiously, and even a little girl came to say hello to you, but you are like a piece of wood. In the end, if it wasn't for the teacher explained to you that you may be about to become a public enemy of Beauxbatons. After hearing this, Seal's face was black like the bottom of a pot. Then again, why did Seal feel that since he apprenticed to Dumbledore, the old man's cold and kind image was gradually shattered? On the contrary, the attributes of his own Pippy Shrimp began to appear on Dumbledore. Teacher, I don't think you said anything nice just now, Seal said to Dumbledore, gritting his back molars. Charles, I'm going to be sad if you say that. It took me a lot of effort just now to explain to the little girl named Gabriel how loving you and little Hermione are. Of course, maybe the little girl's sister is not so happy. Dumbledore winked at Seal mischievously, and then continued to tease, by the way, I forgot to mention that both sisters have Vela blood, and they look very beautiful. It's a pity, little Seal. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal's face turned from black to red, then from red to black. The change was as fast as the Sichuan opera. Finally, Seal gritted his back molars and said angrily to the naughty old man across from him, Teacher, I ask you to be serious, I am beginning to suspect that you are someone else pretending to be a compound decoction. Dumbledore obviously knew that he couldn't go too far, otherwise, Seal would not be able to bear to go and destroy himself wherever he went back to school, so he immediately put away his old and sloppy face, and left Beauxbatons with Seal. School gate. Wait a minute, do you want to go to France's Magic Street? Dumbledore took it as soon as he saw it, and took Charles to start walking on the streets of France. Thanks to Dumbledore's magic, the streets hurriedly passed by. The trust of the two is hiding from the two. Of course, I still want to buy some gifts to go home. Then again, I also want to go to the Champs-Élysées. Teacher, lend me some francs. Charles asked his teacher for money unceremoniously. Bordeaux's bad behavior is still fresh in my eyes. Charles would not be the slightest polite. Dumbledore shook his head helplessly when he saw Seal, who had a grudge against him immediately. Having said that, Dumbledore was still very interested in the Champs-Élysées, the so-called fashion forward of Muggles, so he also half-heartedly agreed to give Shire some funding. The two traveled in France with the idea of traveling at public expense. Of course, it was mainly Shire's public expense tour, and Loudeng just felt sorry for his pension. After shopping in France for a while, they didn't remember to go back until the evening. Of course, this time Dengblado obviously still called the Fox brand scooter honestly. After all, the two bought a lot of things, and all of CL's things were put in CL's small box, but old Deng's things were forced to carry them by hand due to CL's inability to make trouble. CL's theory is very simple, avoid having to share the spoils after going back. So, when the old Deng in the Givenchy suit appeared in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts with the magical world, the non-magical world, and the Charles in the small suit accompanied by the flames, what did that scene really look like? How weird. Dumbledore was dressed in a casual suit, with a braided beard, and a bohemian top hat on his head, which looked a bit like the godfather of fashion gangsters. Tired of looking at the hilarious photo wall opposite, Seal clapped his hands in satisfaction and comforted his teacher. Don't worry about the teacher, they are just jealous of your handsomeness. Then he clapped his hands and hurried back to the bedroom with a small suitcase. If I remember correctly, the trio might meet Filch's petrified cat tonight. Of course, the main thing is that Seal wants to go back to send gifts and go to France by himself. If his mother finds out and brings nothing with him, it is estimated that it will not be much better to go home. In the end, I have to go to tonight's dinner party. Those three ignorant children must always be taken care of, otherwise the three of them will definitely be hungry tonight, and I don't know if Hermione is obedient or not. Speaking of which, I can't remember where my packing bag is in the bedroom. I must look carefully when I go back. Seal muttered and started to carry his small suitcase to the bedroom. Chapter 85-First Victim Cat. When Seal rushed into the auditorium with the huge packing bag he brought to prepare for the banquet had already begun. There were no ghosts at the banquet tonight, and they probably all went to Nick's death party. Shaur glanced around and couldn't find the three little ones, so he began to find a seat with no one, like a first-year freshman. What the hell? Can you still do this? With the expression on his face, he began to eat and pick it up. During the period, I didn't forget to check out the teacher's chair. It was obvious that old Deng didn't come to the banquet. He was probably worried about his pension in the office, and by the way, he liked the new clothes that Charles picked for him. Charles can't take care of that much anymore. He hasn't had a good meal in the past few days. Nicole's departure has left him with no appetite for several meals. In the end, when he traveled in France, Charles had a big appetite. But although the French food was good, the price and weight made Charles, who was still in the half-old boy eating his father stage, feeling that he couldn't get enough to eat. And I have to bring food for the two unscrupulous boys. Of course, Hermione is still willing. After all, her own sister can't be hungry. Better to solve it together. When the banquet was over, Seal was the only one carrying a huge bag, which caused some second-rate purebloods in Slytherin to constantly ridicule that Seal was the reincarnation of a starving ghost. Fortunately, Seal had a phobia of giants. Dasha X thank you imminently. Carrying a huge food bag on his back, Seal followed the little wizards and started to line up and slowly started to walk out, preparing to return to the dormitory to rest. After all, tomorrow is Monday, and the school will have classes. When Seal staggered to the gate, he remembered a scream from far away from Seal, and then the crowd began to riot, and the words Harry, Hermione, and the dead cat began to rush into Shaur's ears. Fortunately, Professor McGonagall, who had experienced the devastation of the twins in the Shire, responded quickly, and immediately organized the teachers to control the discipline of the team, and then began to squeeze past the past events. Seal followed behind Professor McGonagall surreptitiously, and through the road opened by Professor McGonagall, Seal came to the scene of the incident effortlessly. Seal, who squeezed out the crowd, took a closer look. My dear, if this was a horror movie, there would be no need for a set. Filch's cat was hung on the wall, stiff like a specimen, and the wall was written in blood. What was written about the opening of the secret room, in Seal's opinion, was some very outrageous threat. The three little ones stood beside them with pale faces. Filch cried and grabbed Harry, and Harry was the murderer. Professor McGonagall glanced at the scene, and his face was not very good-looking. Obviously he remembered it. The accident a long time ago. Just about to step forward to comfort Filch, who was crying like a child, but at this time, Filch, who was already Shelazy, was in charge of Professor McGonagall, and turned to look down on Seal, who was following behind Professor McGonagall. Immediately, he shouted loudly, "You are also suspicious. Charles Lancaster, you came late to the dinner party, and you may have started with my cat. And you often hang out with these three little bastards, there are also suspicions." Seal is really speechless at this moment. If the magical world has the internet, Seal really wants to type a black question mark emoji of Nick Young. Can this hang on me too? Put away the black question mark on his face. Dumbledore's voice came from behind the crowd. Mr. Filch, I don't think this has anything to do with Seal, he just returned to Hogwarts with me. TZ. With the sound of Dumbledore's voice, the crowd automatically separated into a path. Dumbledore stepped forward quickly, looked at Filch, and asked softly, "Can I take a look first?" Dumbledore's prestige for many years still played a role at this moment. At least the old squib who kept wiping tears at this moment finally regained a bit of IQ. He nodded lightly, indicating that Dumbledore please feel free. Dumbledore took out his wand and began to chant continuously. Seal knew that Dumbledore was verifying whether Filch's cat was really petrified, so as to judge whether Seal's prediction was accurate. After a long time, Dumbledore put down his wand, looked at Filch and said, "Don't be sad, Argus, Mrs. Loris is not dead." After hearing Dumbledore's words, Filch seemed to grab a life-saving straw, grabbed Dumbledore's robe and began to keep asking if it was true. Dumbledore didn't mean to be impatient at all. He looked around and said softly, "What I said is true, Argus, but I don't think this is the place to talk." As soon as Dumbledore finished speaking, Lockhart jumped out and said loudly that his office was very close and he could contribute, with the pride on his face as if he had made a great contribution. Dumbledore didn't refuse. He dispersed the students who were watching the excitement, stopped Seal, and led a large group of people to Lockhart's office. Seal got close to the three little ones, and before the three of them could start to speak, he threw the food bag on him to Ron, saying that it was dinner for the three of them, and then quickly caught up with the one who was walking in front. Dumbledore. "Teacher, what do you think?" After Seal caught up, he whispered to Dumbledore beside him. "It is indeed a petrochemical. Looking at the environment at the scene, it is difficult for me to judge whether that thing is really thoughtful, and it is too coincidental for Seal." Dumbledore frowned tightly and replied to Seal in a low voice. "Okay, then I think the teacher should have enough potions to deal with such a situation." Seal said indifferently, "As long as the great magic world doesn't kill people, it's not a big deal, let alone an old cat." Hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore showed a rare smile. "Yes, I have prepared a lot of potions in advance, which are aimed at petrification." Hearing this, Shaw was completely relieved, and Shaw, who was no longer worried, began to awaken his pee-pee shrimp attribute. "Speaking of which, teacher, why didn't you go to the dinner party and try on clothes?" Seal whispered to Dumbledore a little mischievously. The corner of Dumbledore's mouth twitched, and he squinted helplessly at Seal who was blinking constantly, followed by a ruthless rant in a low voice. "Charles, you have to understand the difficulty of a centenarian living alone. At least I am very slow in changing clothes, and I also need some time to pay tribute to my lost pension." After listening to Dumbledore's words, Seal stopped in surprise and looked at Dumbledore who was still advancing in surprise. He kept asking and repeating this question in his heart. Is this still the unsmiling old dang? Dumbledore, who was walking in front, had a smile on his mouth. Sure enough, only magic can defeat magic, and by the same token, only Pippi Shrimp can be beaten skinnier than him. Chapter 86 follow-up to the event. After a short distance, the group came to Lockhart's office. As soon as they entered the door, Shire felt physically uncomfortable. The room was filled with Lockhart's portraits and photos, all without exception. Smile at the crowd. Lockhart didn't seem to feel embarrassed at all and happily began to brag about his experiences to everyone, and began to pretend to be able to unlock the petrification curse on Mrs. Norris, before being broken by Dumbledore. After the herbs that need to be configured with mandrakes, they start to boast that they can configure it. Maybe it was Snape next to him who finally couldn't stand it anymore. He stood up and said with a cold face that he was the teacher of potions class. Looking at Snape's stinky face, Lockhart thought for a while before finally giving in. Stand by and don't speak. After a series of discussions, the 4 Seal Talents were released from the office and instructed to return to the dormitory as soon as possible. Before leaving, Dumbledore secretly told Seal to find time tomorrow to find him through some little magic. Seal also nodded vaguely, indicating that after he knew it, he walked to the bedroom with the 3 little ones. Ron carried a heavy food bag and walked at the back, and Seal took the lead. When several people were halfway through the constantly changing stairs, Harry hesitated for a long time, but still called out to Seal. "Charles, wait, I think I just heard something," Harry said uncertainly. Charles didn't seem too surprised to hear Harry's words, and turned to look at Harry. "What did you hear?" Harry looked at Seal's serious look, and suddenly began to doubt himself. "I heard a voice saying I was hungry, and it came again, damn it, or something." It was like a whisper of a person, the voice was very small. "I'm not sure." Hermione was rather surprised at this time, looking at Harry who hesitated. "Why didn't you tell Headmaster Dumbledore just now?" Harry was also hesitant. That voice was too low, and it was only me who heard it. I suspected that I had heard it wrong, so I didn't say it just now. Seal patted Harry on the shoulder to signal Harry not to be nervous. He would handle it himself, and Ron had just caught up with a heavy bag on his back. "What are you talking about?" Ron asked, looking at the three people who were standing still in front of him. "Charles, damn it, how much food did you take? It's really heavy. Hey Harry, help me with it." Quote. Seal glanced at Ron. "Not much, enough for the three of you to eat tonight. By the way, how about the death party you attended?" Seeing Seal's smiling face with malicious intent, Hermione seemed to react the most, and rushed up to give Seal a punch. "Charles, you know. You didn't stop us." Then Harry and Ron also reacted and looked angrily at Seal, who was rubbing his arms, but Seal spread his hands indifferently and looked at the three angry people. "Well, I'll be honest, I know, but if I don't let you go, will you not go?" Hearing Seal's words, the trio were silent for a while, but they were still angry. Hermione punched Seal again, and then walked away angrily. Ron and Harry helped each other pick up a huge bag. When passing by Seal, the two of them gave Seal an international friendly gesture very tacitly. Seal spread his hands, indicating that he was shot a second time tonight, and muttered helplessly, "It's not bad for me." Then he quickly chased after him. "Hey, you three, wait for me." In the end, they were still waiting for Seal at the fat woman at the door of the lounge, because Seal never knew the password that had just been changed this morning. After a few people climbed through the passage of the lounge, looking at the empty lounge, the four of them sat around the fire and opened the bag that Seal brought back. Looking at the delicious food in front of him, the dazzling array of food deeply stimulated Ron, who is a foodie. "Look, this is human food." Nick's death party was a disaster. Harry remembered the moldy cake at the party and all kinds of smelly dishes, nodded deeply in agreement, then grabbed the leg beside him and took a bite. Even Hermione rolled her eyes at Seal and began to feast on it. It was true that the ghost party was not something that humans could attend. After everyone had almost eaten, Seal thought about it, ran to the dormitory and took out the glasses Nicole May gave him, then ran to Hermione's side. Looking at Hermione's puzzled eyes, Seal smiled. "This little girl is really cute at this time." Then carefully put the glasses on Hermione's face. "Well, it's very beautiful. Hermione promised me. Don't take it off except for sleeping, okay?" Hermione nodded with a blushing face. Harry and Ron were still discussing Filch's cat, not paying attention to what was going on here, grabbing some food from time to time and putting it in their mouths. Seeing Hermione nodding, Seal nodded with satisfaction and walked away, and stopped beside Hermione. After a while, Hermione seemed to want to understand something and looked at Seal. "Seal, tell me honestly, do you know something?" After Seal heard Hermione's words, he was stunned for a moment, and then replied with a mocking smile, "You think too much, what can I know?" Hermione was still a little suspicious and asked seriously, "Really? Then why did you give me glasses?" When Sha'ur heard this, he was obviously relieved. If he really destroyed Lao Deng's savior cultivation plan, he might actually be brought back and forth by Lao Deng as punishment. The inner Seal felt a cold sweat, but he still maintained a smile on the surface. "Of course, I will never lie." Hearing Ciel's words, Hermione obviously rolled her eyes. Anyone who did Ciel's nonsense would be in hell. Hermione could retort. Charles continued, "As for the glasses, don't worry, I made them out of Nicole May. They can effectively prevent myopia and are very suitable for you." Schalke didn't lie. These glasses can really prevent eye diseases such as myopia, and it's a big and no small function. This was also added by Nicole May. Hearing Ciel's answer, Hermione cried out in surprise, "Nicole May. How did you find him, Ciel? God, is he really 600 years old?" Hermione's voice successfully attracted the two people who were doing nothing there. They also came over and looked at Ciel. The three of them were familiar with the name Nick LeMay. When they were in first grade, they all spelled it out for this name. Exceeded. Had no choice but to tell about his experience of confinement in the past 2 days. When he heard the news of Nicole May's death, several people were very sad, and Hermione even had red eyes. Seeing the low-spirited trio, Ciel was a little amused, and he was like that at the beginning, Then he stood up and rubbed Hermione's head vigorously. Okay, don't be sad. In the words of Mr. Nicole May, he is a remnant of the old age, and the new age has no boat to carry him. So he decided to embark on a new adventure. Ron was stunned by these arrogant words and couldn't speak. He stared blankly at Seal. Only Hermione touched her chin and asked seriously, Mr. LeMay really said that? Seal replied casually, it's possible, I said it. After speaking, Seal's brain realized what he had said, and he quickly covered his mouth. The blood of Harry and Ron disappeared in an instant. The two looked at each other tacitly, and then quickly reached a consensus, damn, beat him. Chapter 87-Gossip. In the early morning of the next day, the incident of Filch's cat was still circulated. The students were discussing topics such as the Slytherin in the Chamber of Secrets, but Draco led a group of people with high spirits, as if opening the door. The person in the secret room is just like him. Occasionally, when I see a little wizard from a Muggle family in Gryffindor, I can't help but sneer at it, be careful to be cleaned up by monsters or something, and even publicly announce that I am pure blood, and I will never be hung up in the secret room. Take it like a mudblood or something. Of course, he didn't dare to say this in front of Seal, but when Seal learned of Malfoy's actions from the first-year Gryffindor, he smiled helplessly. Master Malfoy, no matter what time there's a hint of childishness, which can be Malfoy. Some students even asked Professor McGonagall about the secret room in class, and rumors such as being deducted 5 points by Professor McGonagall began to fly in the school. In the days that followed, the atmosphere of exploration in the school was still strong, as if this matter was never over, although Filch's cat appeared normally the next night to patrol the castle with Filch. Finally, on Wednesday afternoon, when everyone in Gryffindor was attending the history of magic taught by Binns, Harry was brainwashed by Ron's words of the oldest teacher, and he got up with a fever. Ask what the secret room is. For a moment, the whole class was silent, even Slytherin, who was not so interested, became calm, waiting for Professor Binns, the ghost teacher who had been at Hogwarts for the longest time, to answer. Looking at the eyes that seemed to be condensing into substance around him, Professor Binns' eyes gradually lit up, as if he had finally woken up from the boring study, glanced around, and slowly began to speak. Well, it looks like you all want to know. Let me think about it. Oh yes, a long time ago, about 1,000 years ago, the 4 founders created Hogwarts. This you can see in a section of school history. At that time, the 4 founders recruited their own students with different beliefs, but over time, Slytherin's philosophy began to diverge from everyone's. Professor Binns paused, as if thinking for a moment, then continued, like the rumors, Slytherin favors pure bloods, and thinks that non-pure bloods shouldn't come to Hogwarts and end up with others. The 3 founders parted ways. But it is rumored that before leaving, Slytherin secretly built a secret room and placed a terrifying monster in the secret room, hoping that one day his descendants could open the secret room and evolve the bloodline of the entire academy. As soon as Professor Binns finished speaking, there was a huge discussion in the entire classroom, and even a Slytherin idiot stood up and pointed at some non-pure blood classmates and laughed loudly. Looking at the scene that looked like a dance of demons, Seal curled his lips in disdain. He didn't say anything, he just continued to look at Dumbledore's notes in his hand. It was obvious that he should continue to strengthen himself to be the king. Professor Binns was unable to stop the discussion among the little wizards until the end of the class, and even during the dinner, the whole school knew what Professor Binns said in class. The whole dinner party was discussing this matter, and even the 3 little ones began to discuss their next actions. They were planning to sneak into Slytherin's lounge to find out information. He even tried to bring Seal to join the team, but was cleverly rejected by Seal. Until the end of the banquet, words like secret room, air, clearing, etc. were all around Seal, which made some people panic, and some people were so arrogant as if they were patrolling by nobles. Of course, this has nothing to do with Seal. At this time, Seal finally remembered. A few days ago, he seemed to have promised Dumbledore to find him, but he turned his head and forgot about it. At this time, Seal stood nervously. At the door of the principal's office, I was thinking about what reason I should use to make a quibble. The stone beast guarding the door of the principal's office looked at Seal, who was scratching his ears and scratching his cheeks. His expression seemed to change. It was a little strange, that is, it couldn't speak, or should I absolutely ask Seal, do you still want to go in? What are you doing standing at the door? In the end, Seal made up his mind, and asked the stone beast to open the door, and entered Laodang's office with a heartbeat. I thought you wouldn't come. As soon as he entered the door, Seal heard Dumbledore's ridicule, which made Seal a little embarrassed. Teacher, listen to my sophistry. Charles weakly opened his mouth to explain, but he didn't know what to say. Dumbledore looked at Seal's embarrassed look, and reached out to Seal, motioning for Seal to sit down and start your performance. After Seal sat down honestly, he looked at Dumbledore, and after thinking about it, he decided to fool himself into forgetting Old Deng's agreement, so he said directly, Teacher, do you know about the recent rumors? Dumbledore didn't expect that Seal would choose to fool him directly, although he could see what Seal was thinking at a glance, but since Seal was serious, he didn't go any further, but looked at Seal and asked, I know, what do you think? Seal suddenly felt that his teacher was still very fooled, and answered happily, of course it's nonsense, but I know for sure that Slytherin left to go to a higher level, and the idea of purifying blood is pure nonsense. Dumbledore smiled obviously when he heard Seal's answer, and then said slowly, maybe, it's not nonsense. This sentence made Seal's goosebumps stand up. If it's not bullshit, then Seal's previous conjectures about the basilisk may all need to be overturned. Staring at his teacher, waiting for his next words, Seal's whole body was surrounded by something called a sense of urgency. Seeing Seal's nervous appearance, Dumbledore said with a smile, you must consider the problem comprehensively, Seal. I have checked a lot of school information that can only be seen by the headmaster in the past few days, and it's a pity that Slytherin stayed. The basilisk is indeed to purify the blood, but it can't be denied all at once. Do you know why? Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal was obviously stunned for a moment and began to lower his head to think. After a long time, Seal seemed to have figured out the key to the problem. I see, times. Hearing Seal's answer, Dumbledore was very happy, clapping his hands and saying to Seal, that's right, it's the times. Seal, you can figure it out for yourself, I'm very happy. Looking at Dumbledore's appearance, Seal was not happy, watching Dumbledore waiting for his next words. Dumbledore obviously knew Seal very well, so he didn't say much, and started directly to the topic. It's a long story. Chapter 88-100 years. Dumbledore watched Seal and began to slowly tell. 1,000 years ago, things were very complicated, just in time for the witch hunt in the Middle Ages. Although the textbook said that the witch hunt was a joke, it was undeniable that many freshmen the little wizard died at the first outburst of magic. Even some inexperienced adult wizards, under the crowd tactics of muggles, lost their wands and became food for fire. This directly led to the further weakening of the wizarding world. As the 4 strongest elemental wizards at the time, it was against this background that Hogwarts was created from scratch. But then there was a discord between the ideas of the 4 people. Hufflepuff believed that they should be fraternity, treat them equally, and cultivate the perseverance of wizards so that they could master themselves. Ravenclaw believes that knowledge should be thirsty, and only by swimming in the ocean of knowledge can we change the world. Gryffindors believe that they should have the courage to go forward, only in this way can they dominate the world and break the prejudice of muggles. Only Slytherin, the gentle Slytherin, thought more about the actual situation. He was always afraid that the non-pure blood wizard would reveal the location of the school to the muggles after entering Hogwarts. This will cut off the last inheritance of the magic world. At the beginning, the 4 of them worked so hard to leave a final pure land for the wizards, and Slytherin didn't want to be destroyed like this. So before pursuing a higher goal, the gentle Slytherin made the most ruthless determination in his life. He secretly built a secret room, leaving Hogwarts the last way back. In other words, once muggles start to invade Hogwarts, the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets is the last insurance. Kill all muggles who enter the castle, and do everything in their power to protect the legacy of Hogwarts and make him become a secret realm, waiting for the birth of a new little wizard to attract him to accept the inheritance. He even did not hesitate to smear himself, created many rumors, even broke with the 3 giants on the surface, adopted secret protection methods behind his back, and even took the initiative to create some suitable enemies for Hogwarts to exorcise the little ones. The wizard's self-motivated mentality. Even secretly looking for ways to improve themselves, all efforts are hoping that one day in the future, the prosperity of the entire magic world can be restored, and magic can be restored to the peak of the past. But it is a pity that Slytherin failed. His efforts were indeed to preserve the inheritance of Hogwarts. For thousands of years, the castle has accepted wars big and small, and countless people have tried to rule this Britain in various ways. The only school in the magic world has become the new Wizard King, but unfortunately, none of them have succeeded. Although the inheritance has been preserved, there are still many problems, such as the theory of pure blood, such as the idea of ruling knowledge, many. But it is estimated that Slytherin did not expect that the things he tried so hard to protect, even the things he wanted to protect even at the cost of more than 1,000 years of infamy, were easily destroyed in the hands of his descendants, and even his descendants became the villain who tried to control the castle in vain. Hearing this, Charles lamented the impermanence of the world, and was also moved by Slytherin's great mind. Maybe this wise and refined gentleman has regarded Hogwarts as a belief. And it is estimated that Slytherin himself did not think that his life's hard work would be ruined by an illegitimate child of his own family. Seal simply brought it in. If he was Slytherin and knew what was going on, he would probably. Hanako was so angry that he crawled out of the grave, picked up the sword of Gryffindor, and personally gave Voldemort a night charge. Really, even using magic can be regarded as a kind of displeasure. Thinking of this, Seal covered his mouth and let out a snort of laughter. Dumbledore glanced at Seal in confusion. It was obvious that I was talking about 1,000 years of tragic history. I found it after rummaging through boxes and cabinets for a long time. What are you laughing at? Looking at Dumbledore, who looked at him with a little doubt, Seal shared his thoughts with a smile. After listening to Seal's thoughts, even Dumbledore helplessly covered his mouth and smiled for a while. Not to mention Slytherin, Voldemort taught him how to say it, if his body did not allow it, or he wanted to charge a knight against Voldemort. The two chatted and laughed for a long time, and it was almost curfew. Dumbledore interrupted Seal and began to get serious. Seal, I want to ask you one thing. Dumbledore looked at Seal with a serious look on his face, so that Seal didn't turn around all of a sudden, and he kept muttering in his heart that the old man's brain circuit was really jumping, and his expression was really calm. With his own teacher. But it doesn't matter. Who asked you to be my teacher? Seal waved his hand, and said to Dumbledore rather arrogantly. Dumbledore was a little amused when he looked at Seal. Seal might have forgotten that he also knew Chinese. He had read some literary works of that great eastern country, and knew who Seal was imitating. Continued. Promise me Shire and take care of Harry and Weasley, I owe them a lot. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal immediately put on a mask of pain. To be honest, Seal really didn't want to take care of these two reckless men. It's okay to be friends, but to be a nanny. But get around me. Looking at Seal's mask of pain, before Seal could say no to refuse, Dumbledore immediately continued. Don't think too much about Seal, it's just the care between friends. I won't let you take care of me in every detail. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Charles originally wanted to take off his mask of pain, but after thinking about it, according to his personality, he didn't forget the master of the table even after dinner. The idea of me taking a freelance job is too whimsical, isn't it? So Charles hesitated for a moment and then put it down, the hand that wanted to remove the mask of pain, and put a mask on himself. Looking at Dumbledore, who was looking at him expectantly, Charles said in pain, Teacher, it's not that I don't want to, it's just that my ability is limited. I've tried my best to take care of that little hairball, okay? As he spoke, he kept rubbing his thumb with his index finger. Seeing Seal's appearance as a rogue, how could Dumbledore, who was mature, not understand what he meant? he shook his head amusingly, and took out a book from the shelf and handed it to Seal. "Here, this is the water element magic I have mastered," Dumbledore said with a smile. Hearing this, Shatter immediately took it with a smile, but when he glanced at the thickness, the smile immediately froze on his face. "Good guy, it's only the thickness of an ordinary textbook. How are you fooling around?" Looking at his teacher with some disgust, "Teacher, you give this. In this case, it will be difficult for me to help you." Seeing the expression on the Philistine of Seal, Dumbledore couldn't help but smile bitterly, and gave Seal's head directly. "Fuck off, I'm also a water element that I only recently awakened. These are all things I figured out by myself, there is no more." Hearing this, Charles covered his head, looked at Dumbledore pitifully, did not speak, just looked pitifully at his teacher. In the end, Dumbledore was forced to give Seal a borrowing note from the forbidden area, and then asked Fawkes to quickly send the Wicked back to his bedroom. Dumbledore said that he didn't want to look at Seal for a second, and it was obviously too much to walk through the door. Slow. As Seal and Fawkes disappeared into the flames, the smile on Dumbledore's face gradually died down. "I don't know what happened to my old friend." After he finished speaking, he shook his head and went upstairs to rest. Chapter 89 _ The Three Little Puppets. When Seal was sent back to the dormitory by Fawkes with a bewildered face, the three little ones were conspiring to investigate Malfoy, and they were startled when Seal appeared with the flames. The four looked at each other, and the atmosphere fell into a kind of embarrassing situation for a while. In the end, Fawkes couldn't stand it any longer. He cried out, and then disappeared into the lounge with the flames. A cry from Fawkes seemed to break the awkward situation, and Charles mechanically raised his hand to say hello. "Hey, where are you all?" The three little ones looked at each other collectively, and then Hermione suddenly stepped forward and grabbed Seal, who was still in an embarrassing situation. "Where have you been? We can't find you anywhere." Seal touched his nose in embarrassment, and replied in a low voice, "He went to the principal's office. I can't say that I was sent back by Fung, a tool that my teacher disliked in the principal's office." Seeing that Seal didn't ask for specific details, it was a secret if he asked, Hermione patted her head helplessly, but didn't say anything. Anyway, they were almost used to Ciel's mysterious appearance. So the three little ones dragged Seal and started chattering about their plans, going to the Slytherin lounge to find out. Ron and Harry agreed that Malfoy was the most likely Slytherin heir. Seeing the determined expressions of the two boys, Seal couldn't help but pouted. Could Malfoy be the heir? The gatekeeper for the heir is almost the same, but when it comes to going to the Slytherin lounge, Seal is very interested. Legend has it that Slytherin's lounge is very gorgeous, and it is also built under the lake, and you can see the creatures in the lake. What is this? In the Muggle world, that's the treatment of a 5-star underwater hotel, and you can see the species in the Black Lake. What is this? Ready-made fish locator. Seal expressed that the temptation was great, and the troubled Seal immediately decided to participate, but the only requirement was that he never wanted to pretend to be someone around Malfoy. So the four secretly discussed it for a long time, and finally decided to use the compound decoction to sneak in. As soon as Seal heard about sneaking in, he was invigorated. As a loyal player of Creed in his previous life, Seal said that "I am very familiar with sneaking, so I don't need to be so troublesome." Hearing Ciel's words, the eyes of the three little ones immediately lit up, wanting to hear what Ciel had to say. After all, to be honest, compound decoction sounds like it needs a lot of school rules and scores. Charles happily said that the so-called sneaking in is to make everyone dizzy, so that no one will know that we have sneaked in. As soon as the words fell, the eyes of the three little ones immediately changed from the star's eyes to the expression of, "You seem to have that serious illness," and expressed that they did not want to care about Charles. So the three little ones abandoned any advice from Shatter and prepared to discuss how to get the compound decoction. Around this potion, the three made many plans. The only downside was that Hermione finally calculated that if the plan went smoothly, the four of them would definitely violate more than 50 school rules. As for the score, the 4 academies combined are not enough to deduct, so Hermione expressed concern about this. But Seal got up again, and waved his hand generously, saying that if the school rules are not the school rules, there is only one Hogwarts school rules: don't get caught. After hearing Ciel's words, the three agreed, and after hurriedly discussing the details, they decided to go back to rest. After all, tomorrow will be a Quidditch match between Gryffindor and Slytherin. Harry needs to get enough energy to fight against Malfoy, and I heard that Malfoy's father Lucius will come to cheer for his son tomorrow. Ron and Harry Lee said that this game must not be lost. That is to say, Hermione and Seal are not interested in this, but regarding the battle a few days ago, Seal decided to take a look. Happy. Early the next morning, while Seal was still dreaming in bed, the quilt was lifted. In a daze, Seal got up in a huff, grabbed the wand under the pillow and jumped up. Just as he was about to give this shy bastard a hard blow, he saw an angry brown hairball standing by the bed with akimbo. Ciel's anger disappeared in an instant. He scratched his head and sat on the bed. Before Ciel could ask how the girls got into the boys' dormitory, Hermione took the lead and started outputting to Ciel. Look at the time, Shire. What time is it? Get up and pack up. We're going to the Quidditch pitch. Didn't you say you were going to see it today? I got up early in the morning, and now I've finished breakfast and you're still sleeping. Balabara said a lot of Hermione's anger, and her little face blushed. It seemed a little funny to see Ciel, and when she looked at the indifferent Ciel, Hermione's face was puffed up in anger. Seeing Hermione's expression, Ciel immediately jumped up and went to wash his butt on fire. It was estimated that the little girl was going to get really angry in a while, and Hermione's anger was still very scary. After Ciel quickly packed himself up, the two of them walked to the stadium together. Harry and Ron had already gone to the stadium. The little girl kindly brought Ciel a breakfast for him to eat on the way. When the two came to the stadium, the game had already started. The two of them took a lot of effort to come to Ron from the cheering crowd. Ron's face was not very good at this time. Fendor is behind. Ciel said he didn't know much about it. Ciel, who was not very interested in ball games since he was a child, was the only ball he had ever come into contact with was Momonosuke's ball, which is completely different from the current game, right? Charles calmly sat in the chair and ate Hermione's loving breakfast while watching two teams of people riding brooms in the sky. You come and go, it was a lot of fun. Under the interference of Malfoy, Harry kept looking for the trace of the golden snitch in the sky. Finally, after a long time, the Gryffindor team scored a goal, and in an instant, the cheers around him startled Ciel, and the sandwich in his hand almost fell to the ground. He glanced at the enthusiastic crowd around him with some resentment. Even Hermione, who was not very interested in Quidditch, was infected by the atmosphere and cheered constantly. What's more, she even took off the sheets and drew a lion constantly cheering, roaring for the Gryffindor team. Of course, the Slytherin on the opposite side is not at all disadvantaged. Compared with the frenzy of Gryffindor, Slytherin mainly highlights one discipline: unified slogan, unified dress, and even the same action, which even suppressed Gryffindor for a while. Lots of cheers. Chapter 90_Fire Lion Gryffindor. This situation is obviously not a good sign. Watching the unified Nimbus 2001 Slytherin pressing Gryffindor on the field, even Ciel frowned for a while. Compared with Ciel, Ron is obviously more anxious. As the saying goes, the loser does not lose the team, and the ball can be recovered after losing. After all, the four colleges still have a chance to enter the finals again, but if the team loses, it is really lost. Seeing Ron's anxious look, Ciel was also a little unhappy. Although there are some purebloods in Slytherin, there are still some idiots who are pure-blooded and ruin this pot of good porridge. Ciel didn't want his academy to lose to the opposing Slytherin, especially when there was that big bucktooth on the court that he beat up. Finally, after Gryffindor's second goal, Ciel stood up, drew his wand and pointed it to the sky. In an instant, blood-red flames spewed out and slowly gathered in the sky. Gradually starting from a spherical shape, it gradually grew limbs, tail, and head, and slowly turned into a lion like a lion made of blood, and its huge body even covered the entire stand. The amazing thing is that the lion, which is obviously composed of flames, is still galvanizing back and forth, but no one in the stands feels the heat. If you insist, it will only be the heat driven by the atmosphere. Finally, the male lion has completed its transformation in the continuous plating step. It is lifelike and even the mane on the neck is clearly visible. The male lion seems to be standing on an invisible cliff, raising his head full of momentum and roaring. Of course, the roaring was done by Hermione next to him using animal gummies and a sound amplification spell, and Seal didn't have the ability to make the fire element make a sound. At the moment when the roar of the lion came out, everyone in Gryffindor exploded, cheering for their own team frantically, which pushed the atmosphere of the whole game to a climax in an instant. In contrast, Slytherin's momentum suddenly weakened, and even a little sluggish, and even the momentum of the two teams on the field changed. The Gryffindor team began to counterattack, with a lot of momentum, and even a feeling of breaking and standing. On the contrary, the team of Slytherin began to lose momentum, and even some players began to frequently look at Gryffindor. The flame lion in the stands, of course, because watching the lion, Slytherin lost several goals at once. All of a sudden, the balance of the game's victory began to tilt towards the Gryffindor team. Of course, the little wizards just felt that their side was full of momentum, but the professor and Lucius, who was invited to watch the game, did not look so good. As a grown-up wizard who had been in the midst of Voldemort and the Ministry of Magic all the year round, Lucius recognized the four lifelike flame lions in the stands. Damn it! What if it's a fierce fire? If it goes out of control, no one present will be able to live. Lucius cursed constantly, and even began to regret that he had been messing around with his son. Of course, the professors who are doing the same thing as Lucius, especially Professor McGonagall, her face has become extremely pale. She just stepped into elemental magic with the help of Dumbledore, but she knows that this thing released by Seal how lethal. Just as he was about to stand up to stop Seal from messing around, Dumbledore stopped him. Dumbledore smiled and looked at his apprentice's unique way of refueling. He gently shook his head at Professor McGonagall to signal her not to be nervous. Okay. Out of trust in Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall sat down suspiciously, and then Dumbledore leaned over and gently explained the situation in Professor McGonagall's ear. Professor McGonagall's expression went from pale at the beginning to surprise to the end. After Dumbledore finished speaking, Professor McGonagall showed a satisfied look on his face, and glanced provocatively at the old god who was sitting beside the shivering Lucius. After seeing Snape, he began to briefly explain the situation to the professors around him, telling everyone not to worry. Of course, it can only be a simple explanation, and many details are not mentioned. If some professors know that Shire is a descendant of Grindelwald, then some professors may turn around and escape from Hogwarts. Don't look, it's you, Lockhart. In the end, Lucius couldn't bear the oppression of the huge flaming lion, and looked at Snape beside him tremblingly. Friend, don't you care about your teacher? That's not good magic. Lucius was extremely frightened. Now, if Charles was really unhappy and let the lion rush up to bite his son, it is estimated that he might not even find the body in the end. Of course Snape knew about CL's situation. He even talked to Old Dang for this matter. Of course, he let it go in the end. He glanced at old Malfoy, who was posing beside him. Snape's heart was full of disdain. Don't worry, that kid can keep it under control. Don't underestimate his talent. If you really talk about realm, he is above us. Snape comforted Lucius next to him, and then stopped speak. Just watch the game on the field. To be honest, this kind of thing made him feel a little uncomfortable. As long as it was about Gryffindor, Snape didn't like it that much, or even rejected it. After hearing Snape's words, Lucius was relieved. After taking a look at the surrounding environment, Lucius chose to put his heart in his stomach. This is Hogwarts. Even if Lucius hates Dumbledore here, he has to admit that if Charles really wants to do something, then neither the professors present nor Dumbledore will stand by and watch, even those around him. This friend who has been with him for many years has the ability to protect himself and his children. Lucius, who had put down his heart, instantly became active. Looking at the majestic lion on the field, Lucius felt that it was necessary to re-evaluate Ciel's position in the pure blood. We must test Ciel's attitude. Maybe this is another future Dumbledore. Lucius's mind was constantly flooded with bitterness. It wasn't that he never thought of using some dark means, but all the dark means were in vain. There was no follow-up news, but this kid was still alive and kicking like a normal person. Looking at the flaming lions on the field, Lucius kept muttering in his mind, this scale, this fierce fire, if it appeared last time, it might have been the blue flame in Paris decades ago, right? The only difference is that the dragon was a lion this time. Thinking of this, a terrible thought appeared in Lucius' mind. Could it be that Ciel was taught by Grindelwald? But then Lucius himself denied the idea, which is really unlikely. After all, who is still staying in Nurmengard? Lucius was amused by his idea, but he really guessed it right this time. Chapter 91-Lockhart's Bone-Cracking Curse. With the help of Ciel's flaming lion, the Gryffindor team continued to score like a god. Even Harry was infected by this atmosphere and began to look for the whereabouts of the golden snitch. Finally, Harry seemed to have found something, and he started chasing the golden light with a dive. Malfoy really came out of the speculative family. Although he did not find any trace of the golden snitch, he also knew that he was following closely. Harry will definitely find out. So seeing Harry start to dive and sprint, Malfoy immediately followed, and also saw the whereabouts of the snitch, so the two began to fight around the snitch. Although Ciel was not so interested in Quidditch, he was very interested in the mid-air fight between Harry and Malfoy. The fight between the two began to make Ciel feel as if he were watching an Ace Air Force fighting a dogfight. I even began to sigh that flying brooms are so fun, why didn't I find out before? So Ciel started standing on the chair and kept yelling at Harry some words that surprised Hermione. As soon as Harry saw Ciel standing on the chair and roaring at him, but drowned in the cheers of the crowd, Harry only heard some words such as falling leaves, cobra maneuvering and so on intermittently. Unfortunately, Harry didn't know what Ciel was talking about in his mind, so he ignored Ciel's command and started to concentrate on catching the snitch. The two began to intersperse constantly around the arena, with Malfoy's trash talk mixed in and mocking. Fangjung couldn't hear Malfoy's trash talk, but the two People's Dogfight series watched with enthusiasm. If he added a machine gun or could use a magic wand, it would be absolutely cool. But gradually, Ciel noticed something was wrong. The bludgers on the court started chasing Harry for some unknown reason. Harry went to the bludgers and chased them there. This was obviously abnormal. Ciel thought about it for a while and slapped his forehead, and damn it, he forgot about Dobby. After saying that, he pulled Hermione and started running downstairs. Ron heard Ciel's voice, turned around and saw Ciel pulling Hermione hurriedly running down below, thinking about it and coming up. When the three of them ran to the field, the whistle for the end of the game just sounded. Harry successfully shook off Malfoy and got the golden snitch. Harry, who was lying on the ground, had not had time to rejoice when he saw the bludger. He smashed it in his own head. This frightened Harry all of a sudden. The strong desire to survive prompted Harry to turn around at the limit, and the bludger slammed into Harry's ear. Then the bludger flew high when he saw a miss, and when he wanted to make the second serve, Ciel just ran onto the field. Looking at Dobby's operation, Ciel felt that this little elf really didn't have enough IQ. Before Ciel could feel his emotions, the bludger smashed down at Harry again, so Ciel pulled out his wand and waved his hand to control the flame lion on the stand and jumped down, taking a bite when the bludger was about to hit Harry. He swallowed the runaway bludger, and then waved away the flaming lion who just made his contribution. Harry, do you really do a little bit of shit in Quidditch every year? Charles laughed and complained about Harry. Harry was completely relieved at this time, and the joy of victory gradually faded. He waved to Ciel not to make fun of himself, and felt a sharp pain in his arm. Carefully raised his arm, he found that his forearm had been broken, showing a strange bend, which must have been the injury that he accidentally fell when he was just grabbing the golden snitch. At this time, a group of professors and students in the stands also rushed to Harry's side. Seeing Harry's fractured arm, Lockhart immediately stood up, proudly saying that this was a minor injury, and he could treat it with a spell. Harry said that he didn't believe Lockhart's performance 10,000 times, but seeing Lockhart's confident appearance and the severe pain in his arm, Harry gave in shamefully and did not stop Lockhart. Seal didn't speak. The old god was watching Lockhart's performance with his arms in his arms. He even pricked up his ears and listened to Lockhart's spell carefully, only to see Lockhart taking out his wand and pointing it at Harry's arm with great confidence. A gorgeous snap of tongues came out of his mouth, arm repair. Then there was a soft blue flash, and Harry's arm hammered down like a rubber, looking disgusting. When Lockhart saw that he was playing badly, he didn't panic at all, and said calmly, "Fortunately, Harry, at least you're not in pain now, right?" Harry really didn't feel the pain anymore, but his heart hurt to death. Why did he suddenly believe the words of this bastard? Before Harry could speak, Madame Pomfrey smeared the crowd and strode in. "Professor Lockhart, if I remember correctly, I'm the school doctor at Hogwarts." Then Lockhart, who didn't care where he was smiling awkwardly, helped Harry up and started walking to the school hospital. Charles looked at Lockhart, who used to be embarrassed and could only smile, and felt that this guy was very funny. He stepped forward and complained, "Very good bone-crusting curse, Professor." Then, regardless of Lockhart's blushing face, he followed Hermione to the school hospital to see Harry. In the school hospital, Madame Pomfrey threw a bottle of raw bone spirit to Harry after a brief diagnosis, expressing a small injury. Professor Lockhart was surprised that the bones in his arm were clean, and there was no what information is needed. Drink a bottle of potion and it will grow back overnight. Seeing Harry's constipated expression, Seal laughed, leaning back and forth, constantly teasing that Harry had at least learned a new spell called the bone spelling spell. This led Harry, Ron and Hermione to frequently roll their eyes at Seal, and Harry even said angrily, "You are a scholar, have you learned?" Seal spread his hands and said that he couldn't learn it. Not to mention the spell, that tongue-flicking Seal never learned in 2 lifetimes, but with that gorgeous tone, Seal felt goosebumps when he thought about it now, indicating that he couldn't accept it physically. Hearing Seal's explanation, a few people couldn't laugh. Of course, the consequences were serious. The 3 of them were invited out by Madame Pomfrey as a typical example of disturbing the quiet of the school hospital. The embarrassed 3 people stood at the door of the school hospital. "Look at me, I look at you," and when they didn't know what to do next, Dumbledore's voice came from behind, "I think the 3 of you should go back to rest. Let's celebrate a rare victory, isn't it?" Ron just remembered that, as the victorious party, the lounge is absolutely bustling now, so he dragged the 2 of them to the lounge. When Charles passed by Dumbledore, he whispered, "Look at Harry, there will be a surprise tonight." Then he quickly caught up with the 2 in front. Dumbledore looked at Seal, who had disappeared around the corner, with a look of surprise, and said with a smile, "Looks like I'm busy again tonight." Chapter 92 _ Charles Who Got Nothing. In the following days, Charles seemed to resume his daily life. Dumbledore didn't come to find Charles, and Charles didn't care whether Dumbledore cared about poor little Harry that night. In short, Seal devoted almost all of his energy to Dumbledore's notes, trying to master the spellcasting method of water element by himself, but unfortunately, Seal can only replenish water with water element at most. That's right, it's to replenish moisture. In short, Seal is a personal mask and a water dispenser. This has made Seal depressed for a long time, but in the end, it was Hermione's words that made Seal a little happier. Hermione is right, Hermione has no way to learn elemental magic yet, and at least in the future, she won't need to buy a hydrating mask and worry about dying of thirst in the wild. In the dead of night, Seal could only comfort himself like this. But I don't know why Seal always felt a little uneasy. After recalling it carefully, it seemed that the first 2 elements had been slapped on the forehead. Could it be that he was about to let Dumbledore slap his forehead? Finally, Seal asked Dumbledore this question during the weekend practice. Dumbledore was very happy and answered Seal with a smile, I'm glad you finally asked this question. Take your time to seal. If you can master it at once, is that a talent that is truly enviable? Hearing Dumbledore's answer, Seal looked suspiciously at the old man who seemed to be gloating over his misfortune, and stretched out his hand to signal please start your performance. Dumbledore didn't care, and then replied, Charles, being able to feel the element is only the first step. It's a matter of will, and it's impossible for you to feel the element if you don't go out of your way. But feeling the elements is just getting started. How to make the elements merge with your soul is the next way. Only when you really merge can you become a magician, not a wizard anymore. Seal scratched his head and thought about it for a long time. He was born with the ability to feel the 4 elements. He seemed to have skipped the first step. However, after thinking about the second step for a long time, Seal suddenly seemed to remember that he was told by Grindelwald. The situation of narcissism. So Shire looked pitifully at Dumbledore opposite. Teacher, can you help me? I remember that others helped me integrate my soul with elements. Perhaps, what I lack is just a pat on my head. Hearing Ciel's words, Dumbledore really slapped Ciel on the head hard, and this time he patted Ciel's eyes. The giggling old man looks like if you can't explain clearly today, why don't you both live? Seeing Ciel's resentful expression, Dumbledore laughed even more happily, and teased at Ciel, they lived for over 100 years, and this is the first time I've been asked to slap someone's forehead. Laugh it out. Ciel's expression gradually became serious, and turned from serious to angry. Just when the sentence MMP was about to be said, Dumbledore continued, Okay, let's not make trouble. I know what you mean, but it's a pity Ciel, I'm just getting started with the water element, so don't expect me to force you to merge. Quote. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Ciel was also a little helpless. He couldn't force it, he could do it if he could, and he couldn't do it even if he couldn't kill Dumbledore. Seeing Ciel's depressed appearance, Dumbledore clapped his hands. Okay, don't be discouraged, there will be a way. According to your talent, you can try fusion yourself. Get up, we'll continue to practice Patronus. Damn it, why did your Patronus charm still not take shape after so long? Hearing Dumbledore's urging, Ciel also stood up helplessly. About this, Ciel became even more depressed. For some reason, Ciel's Patronus was particularly difficult to form, and even Ciel would think of his previous life and the goddess first. The experience of the second date is not good, and Dumbledore's completion of the Shire Wizard is stuck here. The two of them were very depressed about this, and Dumbledore even began to wonder if he had really misunderstood Ciel. Could it be that this child was really dark inside and could not use the Patronus? Ciel was also depressed and ruined, and began to wonder if he had some psychological problems, such as depression, which caused all his happiness to be not real happiness. The master and the apprentice had been practicing for a long time, and they both had some doubts about life. In the end, Dumbledore spoke to end today's practice. Regarding the situation of Ciel, Dumbledore said that he needed to go back and look at the information. It stands to reason that the black magic that Ciel has never used, is still a pure soul, and this situation will never happen. Ciel also said that he had worked hard for the teacher. If it really doesn't work, just skip this magic and don't delay the progress. Dumbledore didn't say anything about this, just told Ciel that he would have a curfew if he didn't go back. Ciel rolled his eyes at Old Dang, picked up his own things on the ground, and hurriedly ran out of the room of responsiveness, preparing to go back to the dormitory to take a shower and rest early. He has class tomorrow morning. As the days passed, Shire seemed to be back to being a normal Hogwarts student, scoffing with Hermione every day and listening to Harry complain about how Dobby had hurt him. Occasionally holding a magic book that interests him, pulling Hermione to lie down on the grass next to the Black Lake, feeling the spring breeze, and reading a book, Charles lived a leisurely and comfortable life. No, it should be said that not only Shire, but even the entire Hogwarts students had a very comfortable life. Time is always a good medicine, as if the first attack was forgotten. It was actually quite normal. After all, strictly speaking, the next night, Mrs. Norris followed old Filch around and started patrolling again, as if the attack did not exist. Seal didn't mind too much. Speaking of which, there would be no problem with Dumbledore staring at Ginny, but because Ginny strangled Hagrid's chicken, Seal and the three little ones found a bargain. In those few days, Seal really did his best. 4 people and 1 Hagrid ate every day with a mouthful of oil. Of course, the most important thing was that the chickens that Hagrid raised were not turkeys, but that Char had been in his previous life. Chinese broiler. Moreover, Hagrid is definitely a good chicken breeder. That chicken is so tender and fragrant. The last 5 people actually felt that so many chickens were a bit unpalatable. If it wasn't for Seal supporting his waist, he said that he would really do this, and he would just repeat it. Hagrid even wanted to buy some finished chickens to eat. Chapter 93-Second Victim. Time passed by in a hurry. At noon, Seal pulled Hermione to lie down in the shade of a tree beside the Black Lake, ready to take a rest. Not long after, Harry and Ron also came to Seal, and the 4 of them lay on the grass together and felt the sensation. Breeze. This hobby was only discovered by Harry and Ron recently, and they scolded Seal for a long time, which meant that he didn't tell them where the treasure he discovered, and Seal said he was innocent. In the end, led by Seal, the 4 of them fell in love with the feeling of the autumn breeze brushing their cheeks. Because they sleep well, it always makes people feel very relaxed. Seal closed his eyes comfortably and was about to fall asleep when a first-year Gryffindor hurried over to shake Seal and told Seal Dumbledore to find him, and he was now in the school hospital. Seal's sweet dream was disturbed, so he bid farewell to Hermione beside him and came to the school hospital. As for those 2 men, Seal said it was fine to just ignore it, they were almost used to it anyway. Seal, who stood up to criticize his face, quickly came to the school hospital to see what the old man was bothering him for. As soon as he opened the door, he saw the heads of the 4 academies and Dumbledore surrounding a hospital bed. What to study? Seal leaned up cautiously, and it was Colin who was lying on the bed holding the camera. When Dumbledore saw Seal coming, he shook his head lightly and signaled the deans to go back first, and asked Snape to help brew a potion to remove petrification. After Snape nodded expressionlessly, he left the school medical room with the other 3 deans, leaving only Seal and Dumbledore. Dumbledore was still studying the petrified Colin. He didn't turn around but asked indifferently, "What do you see?" Seal was frightened by Dumbledore's sudden exam, and he went forward to check it. When Seal saw that the film in Colin's camera that took Harry's photos had turned into a black line when the viscous object appeared, Seal couldn't help taking a deep breath and sighed, "What a horrible curse." Dumbledore was obviously stunned when he heard Seal's answer, then shook his head and smiled, "You were taught very well by Grindelwald." Seal just smiled and scratched his head, but did not speak. After a long time, Dumbledore stood up solemnly and said to Seal, "The first victim has appeared, and the poor little wizard will recover tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. But I intend to keep him in the school infirmary for protection." When Charles heard Dumbledore's words, he immediately understood Dumbledore's words, nodded cautiously, and then said to Dumbledore, "I will go to the headmaster's office to find you the night after tomorrow, teacher, you must wait for me." Quote. Dumbledore smiled and nodded, indicating that Seal must come before the curfew. At the very least, Dumbledore must ensure the absolute safety of Seal, because in Dumbledore's eyes, Seal is the future. Seal agreed to Dumbledore's request with a smile, and then turned around to find his little friend. What is the specific situation? Whether it is necessary to decide in advance the life and death of the big snake, it seems that the decision was made after Dumbledore and himself saw Colin's memory the night after tomorrow. Seal made up his mind that if there was a real danger, he would definitely pull his teacher to solve this damn problem in advance, instead of using the old man's temperament to start a savior training plan. When Seal found the trio, they had been arguing fiercely in the open space outside the castle for a long time. After Seal walked over, the 3 of them grabbed him and started to debate. The 3 of you were talking to each other, and it made Seal's head go big. Finally, after listening to Seal for a long time, he finally understood what the 3 of them were talking about. It turned out that a few days ago, the trio had already started to prepare the compound decoction. Harry was responsible for going to the forbidden area in the middle of the night to get the potion book that recorded the compound decoction, and Ron was responsible for coming up with some in the potions class. The movement attracted Snape's attention, so that Hermione could steal a crucial potion. The problem now is that Ron was cowardly before class, thinking about Snape's expressionless and cold face, and thinking about the roaring letter he received when the school started. Ron was decisively cowardly. After listening to it, Seal said that it is not a problem at all. To be honest, he is really good at this thing, and he doesn't have to do it himself. You know that Gryffindor has a guy named Simon. As long as you give him a little with a little manipulation of the potion materials, then according to his talent for blasting ghosts, he can definitely blow up the entire potion classroom. Hearing Ciel's words, apart from Hermione's frantic rolling of her eyes, the other two boys expressed that this idea was a great feeling. As long as the movement was loud enough, then Hermione could definitely be well covered. Then the two began to discuss what to add under Ciel's strange eyes. Of course, you have to ask why Ciel's eyes are weird. The reason is very simple. Our potions professor Snape has long known that they will steal potions. The cause of the incident was still because of the accurate prediction made by Chapter-81-100 when the school started. According to Loudeng's idea, it is not necessary to communicate with the main actors, but don't really screw it up accidentally. Therefore, according to Snape's acting skills, our classmate Hermione can only see his back to complete the key potion theft, and Charles can bet that Snape, the material about the compound decoction, definitely put together a copy and put it in the most obvious place for Hermione to pick it up. So why did Shire fool two stupid bastards into bombing Simon's classroom? The reason is very simple, of course, because of the fun. Seal really wanted to see Snape's frantic look, especially when Harry looked at Snape with innocent eyes in the face of the enemy. Don't get me wrong, Seal is really not messing with Snape, it's just pure curiosity, and this year, Seal has prepared a gift for our lonely professor, Mr. Snape. Thinking of this, with a bad smile on his face, Seal put his arms around the two boys who were discussing and began to flicker. Under the threat of Ciel's 3-inch tongue and some intelligence from Harry's parents, Harry reluctantly accepted the character who went to the trouble. Completely ignoring the expression of Hermione, who was silently watching all this, the three boys hugged each other, and they started to move towards the potions classroom as if they were brothers walking together for a lifetime. Halfway through, Seal suddenly remembered something and asked Harry, "By the way, where did you get that potions book?" Hearing Ciel's question, Harry was also confused. "Didn't he tell you just now?" So he approached Seal and said in a low voice, "After curfew, I went to the forbidden area to get it while wearing an invisibility cloak." After hearing this, Seal broke into a cold sweat. Before deciding the camp of the basilisk, it is better to keep Harry, the only key, safe, so he began to scold constantly, "Why shouldn't you go alone like this, Bara and the like?" Just when Harry was about to get impatient, Seal spit out a sentence, which made Harry furious, and Seal, who had reacted immediately, covered his mouth. "Besides, I have a loan slip approved by Dumbledore, why waste the energy to steal it?" Covering his mouth, Seal looked at Harry and Ron, who were mad at him, and even Hermione looked at him angrily, helplessly paralyzed his hands. "Let's discuss, for the sake of our friendship, don't slap in the face." Okay. *3. Chapter 94 follow-up to the event. I have to say that if Loon is simply destructive, Harry, Ron, and Simon of Shah-Urge can definitely surpass his actions of blowing up his own backyard, and even Seal is willing to call them kings. In Potions class, it was the first time that Seal partnered with a Gryffindor he didn't know, and it was also the first time that he sat at the very end, very far away from Simon, very close to the door. But when Simon's cauldron turned into a bomb, Seal was still half a beat slower, and the black and smoky tears that followed were flowing. There were 2 tears on his face when he staggered out of the classroom. Seal began to admit from the bottom of his heart that he underestimated the destructive power of 1 + 1 greater than 2 when the 3 of them were together. It was obviously a pure magical world that could no longer be pure, and the 3 together could create a magical version of tear gas. "How is the cow?" Seeing Snape rushing out of the classroom with a black face, Seal was really happy. When Professor Lang Nian was so embarrassed, Seal felt that this joke would last a year. Of course, the worst thing was not Snape, but Hermione, who rushed out behind him. It was really snot and tears, and the little brown hair balls successfully turned into small coal balls. Of course, Hermione didn't pay any attention to the people present, but like most of the girls in the class, she covered her face and ran to the bathroom. In the end, Snape used magic to clean the dirt on her face, and then used magic to disperse it. The black smoke of tear gas in the classroom made Seal and a few boys scrambling to drag out the 3 people closest to the explosion who had changed races. After Snape carefully inspected the 3 of them, he found that there was nothing serious, but after being simply fainted, he deducted 10 points for each of the 3, and told Seal to take them back to the dormitory to rest. Anyway, according to the current situation, this potions class will definitely not be available. Even if he can, Snape is not in the mood to take it. Shaking his cloak like a bat's wings, he hurried away with a clear black smoke. Not bad anyway, at least Snape doesn't have to work hard to cooperate with the performance of the 3, right? Anyway, this action is also a little work with thunder and rain. After all, except for the uninformed passerby, everyone present can be said to be actors. Of course, the 3 of Bochar, Snape, and Dumbledore were standing on top of the 3 little ones. The honest Seal would definitely not take the initiative to say these things. At most, when the 3 woke up in the lounge, Seal licked his big face and smiled and told the 3 of them to go to the potions classroom to clean up. Of course, in exchange for Harry and Ron's glares, and Simon's unrequited love. In a blink of an eye, it was time for dinner. When the 3 of them dragged their tired bodies and sat beside Seal, before the 3 of them could speak, news of the attack of Mrs. Corringan-Loris began to spread throughout the auditorium. There was a lot of uproar, and the cowardly even began to search for companions quietly. The 3 people who heard the news didn't care about their exhaustion, and while stuffing food in their mouths, they also started to discuss frantically with the people around them. Seal held the bag in his left hand, and elegantly held a fork in his right while eating the steak on the plate. Occasionally, he would pick up some delicious food and put it in the bag. Still didn't speak. Just as Seal's elegance was timeless, even when he was hugging the feast, Hermione lightly touched Seal, who was eating, and approached Seal cautiously. "Charles, do you know what happened?" Charles looked at Hermione, who was close at hand, with a pair of beautiful bronze-colored glasses on her delicate little face. There was even a hint of beauty that was not shown in the movie. For this beauty, Seal's face turned a little red, and he moved his butt a little shyly before replying to Hermione in a low voice. "It's nothing, Mrs. Corringan-Loris has been petrified. Dumbledore has called Professor Snape. Making potions, no big deal." Seal replied perfunctorily, then turned around and looked at Hermione seriously, as if remembering something. "Promise me, you will never take off these glasses except when you sleep, at least not this year." Seeing Seal's rare seriousness, Hermione forgot about Seal's perfunctory just now, and agreed with a blushing face. After the bustling dinner, Professor McGonagall stood up and gave a short speech, mainly to confirm that the first victim appeared in the school. If the matter has not been investigated clearly, it is absolutely forbidden to travel alone. During the curfew, teachers and the dean will start a joint inspection to find the murderer. Hearing Professor McGonagall's speech, the little friends were very nervous. Only Seal showed mediocre interest. The 3rd time is estimated to be a long time. This year can receive a fresh Voldemort soul. No, to be precise, the reason why Seal agreed to Dumbledore's savior training plan, and even took the initiative to participate in it this time and was responsible for guiding Harry at the right time, was actually for one thing, that is, whether the Horcruxes were there is really a connection, and Seal urgently needs to verify this issue. Of course, Seal feels that Dumbledore is also in a hurry. As the young wizards with different minds returned to the Gryffindor Tower together, Seal did not go back to the bedroom directly, but sat on his knees in front of the fireplace in the lounge. The autumn night was still very cold, and the crackling flames gave Seal a sense of warmth and security, which allowed him to think about the problem better. The three of them looked at Seal, who was sitting on a chair with his legs in his arms, thinking about something. The three little ones just looked at each other, walked over together, sat beside Seal, and sat with Seal in a daze. After a long time, Ron couldn't stand the oppressive atmosphere and said, "I said, how is our potion?" It was then that Hermione remembered that she had been wanting to tell Seal about this, but she never found a chance to do so, so she shook her head and replied, "I just want to talk about this, Seal, I'm sorry, I only took it that day." Arriving at the three-piece material means that one of the four of us can't go to the Slytherin lounge. Seal was still very interested when he heard what Ron said, but when he heard Hermione's answer, he suddenly felt a little lack of interest, and waved his hand indifferently. "It's okay, you three go, I'll just keep watch outside." Hearing Ciel's words, the three of them all looked at Seal with a guilty expression. Seal also said so. After thinking about it, he began to urge everyone to go back to rest quickly. After all, it was very late. But when Seal lay down on the bed, Seal couldn't help laughing out loud. "Forget it, don't go to the Slytherin lounge. Anyway, you can unlock Hermione's Meowgirl form if you don't go. Nice, isn't it?" Thinking of this, Seal showed a sullen smile, and then fell into a deep sleep. Chapter 95-Lockhart's Dueling Club. Early the next morning, an explosive news swept through Hogwarts, and no one even mentioned the attacked Colin classmate again. Yes, our old peacock Lockhart was approved by the headmaster and restarted. Formed a dueling club for all students. Although the original intention was to let the students exercise themselves, so that those who were attacked could leave a trace of life for themselves, but it was obvious that everyone didn't care what Lockhart's original intention was. The only thing that is certain is that since the people of Gryffindor and Slytherin, the two rival colleges, knew the news, the invisible confrontation between the two sides has not stopped. Even in the end, some students who had some grudges at ordinary times also started an invisible confrontation. This is the real world. If this is a Japanese anime, the electric sparks that appear in the confrontation at this time should be enough for the entire London to use. Everyone is gearing up to beat the people they hate. Of course, some people are excited and some people are very flustered. Except for those who are usually foxes and tigers, the most flustered is our classmate Ron. In the morning class, Ron looked at his wand, which was wrapped in tape and crooked, and sighed deeply. He felt that according to the state of his wand, if Malfoy knew about it, he would definitely challenge him to beat the underdog. For this reason, Seal and Harry comforted him for a long time, and finally Hermione made a final decision and said that few people knew about Ron's wand breaking. Arrive. Hearing Hermione's consolation, Ron's whole body turned gray, and for a while, Shire Harry didn't know whether to go up to comfort him or let him go and laugh at him. In the end, Seal and Harry decided to be themselves and comforted Ron, who had lost his color. The four of them had lunch in the lobby at noon and came to the venue prepared by Lockhart, a classroom not much different from the auditorium. Obviously, this classroom was temporarily expanded by someone using the space expansion spell, otherwise it would definitely not be able to accommodate a school person. There was a rectangular high platform in the middle of the crowd. At this time, the crowd was chatting and discussing around the high platform. Seal didn't have much interest in this, just simply wanted to come over to see Lockhart making a fool of himself, so he stood calmly on the outermost side, and the three little ones were very excited and took advantage of their stature to squeeze to the front. Not long after, Lockhart was like a peacock with the screen open. Wearing an extremely gorgeous battle uniform, he pushed through the crowd and stood on the high platform. He seemed to enjoy the feeling of being watched, and he was very happy to clap his hands and organize. After a bit of discipline, he delivered a speech. In view of the recent series of horrific attacks, Headmaster Dumbledore approved me to set up this dueling club. First of all, we would like to thank Professor Dumbledore for his strong support to me. With the sparse applause, Lockhart continued to speak without any panic. The duel club is to train you enough. In this way, you can hope that you will have a little bit of self-defense when you encounter any terrifying things again. Lockhart watched the little wizards below be excited from the beginning to now boring, and hurriedly ended this long talk. Ignoring the chatter of the students below, he took off the cloak that was slung across his back and threw it among a few nympho girls before introducing it. In order to give you a better understanding of the duel, I have invited a teaching assistant. Let us welcome our Professor Snape with a round of applause. Hearing this, Seal regained his energy instantly. Seal knew that Snape was in a terrible mood at this time, but the worse Snape's mood was, the more uncomfortable Lockhart would be, right? Things were just as Seal had expected. After the two completed the duel etiquette seriously, Snape's powerful and miraculous removal weapon sent Lockhart flying out of the ring. Seal covered his mouth and tried to keep himself from laughing so loudly, but in fact, he was almost out of internal injuries. Lockhart was also confused at this time. He did not expect that the usually cold potions professor would have such good skills, and even the same professor did not save him any face. With the thick skin he has developed over the years, Lockhart got up quickly, patted the dust on his body, and said to the students around him with a smile, "I'm fine, I just want to show everyone that if you hit the what will your weapon spell look like. After all, everyone has learned a lot, but they have never seen it." Snape on the dueling stage looked at Lockhart, who was still acting, contemptuously, and sneered disdainfully, and threw back the wand he had just disarmed Lockhart, and then took command of the scene lightly. He spoke directly to the little wizards who were watching. "Thanks to Professor Lockhart for his demonstration, but I don't think it's really a duel demonstration. Next, I will bring a classmate up to demonstrate the real duel with me. Charles Lancaster, come on stage." The students who heard Snape's words all turned their attention to Seal, who was giggling behind him. At this time, Shower also felt like a dog in the sun. It felt as if he had been a quiet eater of melons in a melon field, but suddenly he became a melon. Under the worried eyes of the three little ones, Shaharmojiji stood on the stage and walked to Snape's side to stand back to back with him. Just as Seal stood up, thinking about how this matter would play out, a faint voice reached Seal's ears. "Let me see if you're as good as Dumbledore says you are, Charles Lancaster." Seal raised his head slightly in surprise and glanced at Snape, who had no expression on his face, and sighed slightly in his heart, knowing that this game was definitely not something that could be played. Of course, the most excited person at this time was Lockhart. To be honest, he didn't like the two people on the stage. Charles would be disgraced if he won Snape, who had just caused him to lose face. Will be cleaned up. No matter what the result was, Lockhart made a lot of money, so he took the initiative to stand beside the two to preside over the game. "Now, two people, bow." As Lockhart's voice fell, both Seal and Snape bowed slightly to each other, and then the two of them turned their backs to each other and took 10 steps away from each other. Hand. Lockhart was so excited that he even began to tremble a little as he watched the two sides take up their positions and shouted, "Get ready. Start." Chapter 96-Snape. Seal is actually very uneasy. After all, if it really counts, Seal hasn't really fought anyone since he learned the real elemental magic. Of course, the weak first-year version of Voldemort and the seagoing Grindelwald are definitely not a real battle. As long as the two of them are full of seriousness, Seal can at best guarantee that he will not die for the first time. When Lockhart started speaking, Seal was not polite. He raised a granite stone brick wall directly in front of him. Anyway, the first-hand defense designation would not be wrong. Of course, Snape was not polite. The maximum output of Shenfeng Wying was directly the starting style. Anyway, this is also a counter-curse, and Snape was not afraid that it would not be able to help Seal connect it. After Seal hit a stone wall blocking the view of the other side, he began to frantically stack armor on himself. When Grindelwald fought against him, he clearly remembered what Grindelwald taught him. Most of the wizarding magic is all directed. So it's right to have a stone wall for defense first. This is all the experience that I have summed up after I don't know how many beatings I have suffered. Seal, who had just finished stacking his armor, heard a loud noise from the stone wall. Seal, who was proficient in elements, knew immediately that this was a cursed black magic through the feedback of the elements of the stone wall and soil, and he had not waited for Seal to react. Come here," and then hit the stone wall with it torn apart. The stone wall shattered directly to the ground in a burst of explosions. Fortunately, Seal folded his armor, otherwise it would have been directly painted at this time. Although he did not see the red directly, the shock wave of the stone wall shattered also made Seal directly the ass sits on the ground. Before Seal could catch his breath, Snape's other savagery came over immediately. Seal saw the traces plowed by magic on the ground getting closer and closer to him. Under the strong desire to survive, Seal burst into a huge potential and rolled directly sideways. Snape's Shenfeng Wang swiped against the back of Ciel's head. "Snape, do you fucking want to kill me?" Ciel's anger immediately flared up. It was originally a friendly exchange between teachers and students, but now it seems that Snape is really serious. Dead hand. At this time, the students cheering and onlookers all quieted down. Even those with little knowledge knew the danger of the tricks just now. Snape didn't attack anymore when Seal roared these words. He stood gracefully opposite with his wand in his hand. He didn't even have any ash on his body. There really is no threat at all. Snape looked at Seal indifferently, and replied to Seal in an unusually flat manner, "It seems that you are not qualified to be Dumbledore's student at all." A very flat tone, as if he was stating something. His tone was full of certainty, but in Ciel's ears, this was simply a great sarcasm. "You forced me. Don't regret it." Ciel got up quickly, gritted his back molars and said, "The clay figurine still has 3 points of anger, not to mention that Snape is a big move when he comes up, and the furious Ciel doesn't care anymore. There is no duel, and now Ciel wants to do his best to punch his mother Snape." After Lockhart heard Ciel's words again, he immediately woke up from the shock. He recalled the appearance of Ciel when he signed the bookstore, and kept muttering that all the students are so fierce now. But on the surface, Lockhart still bit the bullet and climbed up to the duel stage with a smile and looked at the two, trying to be a peacemaker. Before Lockhart could speak, Snape over there said flatly, "If you don't want to die, I suggest you go down quickly, you won't be able to handle the scene in a moment." Hearing Snape's words, Lockhart swallowed the lines he had already thought of, and after swallowing a mouthful of saliva with all his strength, Lockhart decided to give up the communication with Snape and turned to look at Ciel. "Charles, listen to me." Before Lockhart could finish speaking, Ciel responded directly to Lockhart with his actions. He saw that blood-red flames rose up from Ciel's body, and he directly answered Lockhart with a rolling word. He raised his wand and pointed it out. The huge fireball flew directly towards Snape. Lockhart, who was caught in the middle, was even more frightened at this time. He was so frightened that he climbed off the dueling platform with his hands and feet. "It has started." Seeing Ciel's fireball flying over, Snape didn't panic at all. He also raised his wand and used the anti-curse of the fierce fire spell to kill Ciel's fireball. It is Lihuo, and the anti-curse of Lihuo can actually suppress fire element magic to a certain extent. Of course, the effect is not that great. Under the constant wear and tear of Snape, the huge fireball has turned into a small fireball the size of a human head when it is close to him. Snape dodged casually. Of course, Ciel would not do nothing for such a long time. As Ciel continued to condense, a flaming lion that was much more flexible and brighter than the Quidditch match appeared in front of Ciel. Just as Snape dodged the small fireball, the flame lion lunged towards Snape as if alive. Looking at the flaming lion flying over, Snape's eyes became rare, and a series of colorful magic spells seemed to be connected in a line, constantly bombarding the flaming lion's body. Ciel wasn't idle either. With the flaming lion flying, Ciel immediately cut off the control of the flaming lion, and continued to attack Snape with only the fire element's own will. Some granite stones at the feet of Ciel, as Ciel's magic began to lift into the sky, gathered tightly around Ciel, and with the wave of Ciel's wand, the originally irregular-shaped stones all turned into spikes floating around Ciel, and as Ciel thought, another layer of flames adhered to it. Having said so much, in fact, Ciel completed these actions in an instant. When Ciel's wand pointed at Snape on the opposite side, the spikes obeyed Ciel's will like a flying sword, dragging the long flame turned and thought Snape rushed over. Of course, Snape also noticed Seal's movements. Looking at the male lion, which had become about the same size as normal, Snape knew that this was not the time to keep his hands, so he immediately started firing on all cylinders. After knocking the flying lion over with a repelling spell, Snape held his wand in both hands and raised it to his chest, pointing at Seal, spitting out some Old English from his mouth, just as the spike was about to fly within the dawes. In front of Pooh, Snape spit out softly, "Ancient magic, the realm of silence." Chapter 97_interrupted end battle. As Snape's spell was completed, a thin blue light film suddenly enveloped Snape like an eggshell. Whether it was the flaming lion flying over from the front, or the earth element spikes blessed by the flames on the side, all of them turned into powder and disappeared when they touched Snape's blue light film. Now it was Seal's turn to widen his eyes. This move made Seal immediately think of Dumbledore's role in fighting Voldemort at the Ministry of Magic. Snape only maintained it for a moment, and after consuming Seal's magic, he immediately cancelled the magic. At this time, neither Seal nor Snape felt bad. Although Seal had gained a lot of magic power compared to the first year, he was still a second-year student, and his magic power was almost bottoming out. And Snape was even more uncomfortable. It was originally a wizard versus a magician, and the lower ranked against the upper ranked. The consumption was already large, and this life-saving stunt at the bottom of the box was even more consumed after it was used. In fact, according to Snape's character, if it were a real battle, Snape might just go to the defense and then pour a bottle of potion in a grand manner. But now it was just a duel, with so many pairs of shocked glasses looking at the stage. Snape finally gave up the idea of potions and buffs for the majesty of his teacher. Both sides looked at each other breathlessly, and both of them knew in their hearts that the next blow would be the last blow. At this time, Seal also calmed down, and understood that in school, Snape would never really kill him. There should be some reason to force Snape to kill him like this. But Charles couldn't understand why he had offended the old bat on the opposite side. It stands to reason that he had no idea about Harry, and he didn't say that he deliberately embarrassed Snape. He even gave gifts to him on New Year's and holidays. That old bat. Whether Snape liked his gift or not, he still gave it. It's a dead end to the gift giver. Thinking of this, Seal's anger began to surge up again, and the more he thought about it, the more angry he became. He took a step back and started life again. Seal decided to punch the old bat on the opposite side. Snape was also a little puzzled at this time, watching the opposite Seal from being lazy to furious at the beginning, and after using the ancient magic he learned from Dumbledore, he turned from fury to shock, and gradually calmed down. Now it's starting to fire again. Snape had begun to wonder if Seal had some kind of mental illness. If Dumbledore hadn't repeatedly stated that Seal could watch over Harry very well, he wouldn't need to test Seal's ability here. Is it true? Can save the boy he loves and hates from the basilisk. The consumption of the two of them is very large, and Seal is a little better. The magic stone on the chest is slightly heating to help Seal continue to recover his magic power, but the atmosphere between the two is still very tense. The calm before the storm seemed to infect everyone present. Everyone was nervous and didn't dare to breathe loudly, for fear that they would disturb the wonderful duel between the two on the field as soon as they made a sound. Of course, it definitely doesn't include Lockhart. Watching the two invariably stop and confront each other, Lockhart naively thought that neither of them could do anything to each other. So Lockhart, who had just crouched on the ground and held his head to watch the duel between the two, stood up confidently as if he had firmed up his beliefs, and sorted out the soiled clothes that he had just crawled off the stage in embarrassment. Glancing at the two of them, he raised his head and put on his signature fake smile again, and said directly, "I said." As soon as Lockhart made a sound, the tense atmosphere was instantly broken. Seal and Snape seemed to have received some signal, and the two began to act at the same time. Seal put his wand on the ground and pulled it up hard. A giant arm composed of huge granite and masonry rose from the ground with Seal's movements. The arm was more than 5 meters long and had a diameter of more than 1 meter. It looks shocking. I saw that Seal's giant arm slowly stretched out with the movement of Seal's wand, and when it was completely vertical to the ground, the giant hand clenched into a fist, and the bright red magma was like a blood vessel. Under the skin of the muscled arm, it was like the resurrection of a stone giant in hell. When the magma in the blood vessels was looming, the giant hand seemed to have finished accumulating power, and then a heavy hammer smashed at Snape from top to bottom. Hardcore Seal, he said that if he punched Snape, he would definitely punch him. No matter how big the punch was, it was a punch anyway. Of course, Snape wasn't idle either. The moment Seal squatted down, Snape raised his wand above his head. The black smoke was slowly getting thicker and thicker. With the formation of Seal's giant arm, the black smoke on Snape's side was so thick that Snape could not be seen at all, and even blood-red light occasionally flashed through the black smoke. If the distance is a little farther at this time, it can be clearly seen that it is not that the black smoke is so thick that Snape cannot be seen, but that the black smoke has almost turned into substance and turned into a lying giant snake, holding Snape in prison inside the prison. As Seal's fist fell, Snape's smoky giant snake also opened its huge blood-red mouth and bit toward Seal's stone arm from bottom to top. Seeing all this, the little wizard was very nervous. Everyone knew that there would be a winner or loser in this duel, but things often didn't develop according to everyone's wishes. Just as the fist was about to hit the giant snake 7 inches, and the giant snake was about to bite Seal's stone arm, the door of the classroom was slammed open, and then a thin blue light film spread out at an extreme speed. Almost in an instant, the light film swept through the magic of the two, and as the light film swept across, Seal's giant stone arm, and Snape's black smoke snake were like little sparks. Like encountering a large basin of water, it all turned into powder and disappeared. What followed was an angry growl. Enough. Seal turned his head in surprise, and saw that Professor McGonagall walked up like an angry lioness and shielded Seal behind him, looking at Snape angrily. Dumbledore at the door was smiling and putting away his wand, while Dumbledore was surrounded by worried Hermione. Obviously, when Hermione saw that half of the situation was not good, she immediately ran out to find it. Professor McGonagall and Dumbledore come over. Seeing that Snape didn't reply immediately, Professor McGonagall turned to look at Seal up and down. After confirming that Seal was just a little tired and not injured, he turned to look at Snape angrily, as if protecting him. Cubs are as domineering as a lioness. Professor Snape, I think you should give me an explanation. Chapter 98-Old Deng possessed by the soul of the 3 generations of Hokage. Hearing Professor McGonagall's question, Snape did not answer Professor McGonagall, but turned to look at Dumbledore, who was standing at the door with a smile, and nodded slightly. After Dumbledore saw Snape's nod, his smile became brighter and brighter. He looked at Professor McGonagall opposite Snape with a smile, and then walked quickly between the two. Okay Minerva, I told Severus to do my best. This is CL's midterm exam, don't be nervous. Dumbledore comforted him with a smile, like a lioness protecting her cubs, the same Professor McGonagall. Although Dumbledore said so, Professor McGonagall didn't believe a word of it. Looking at the scene, it was like the end of a war. The traces of CL's earth element magic were left everywhere. But because there were other little wizards at the scene, Professor McGonagall didn't say much, just looked at Dumbledore with some doubts. Dumbledore smiled without explaining much. Although Professor McGonagall didn't ask any more questions, Shire looked at his teacher with a black question mark on his face. What? Teacher, you feel your conscience and say this is called an exam. And it hasn't been notified yet. Hearing CL's complaints, Dumbledore looked at Seal with a smile. It's just the exam. The enemy will never have to notify you before they can call you. Charles heard Dumbledore's dangerous reply. He had a Spartan expression on his face. The word MMP was on his lips, but he didn't dare to say it. If he said it, who would know that it was white on the surface, but black when it was cut open? What else can the oily old man do? Although Seal didn't say anything, the little wizard's onlookers didn't care so much. When they heard Dumbledore's words, they started a violent discussion, and they stopped after a while, looking at Seal with pitiful eyes. Poor Charles, I don't know what kind of Spartan education is being carried out under our principal. I hope you can live to adulthood. Although silent, This belief was clearly expressed through the eyes of everyone. It made Seal feel as if he had awakened some legilimency talent. Shaking his head, Seal shook the nonsense thought out of his head. Just as he was about to ask what was going on, Dumbledore interrupted him directly. Okay, it seems that Seal's test has passed successfully. Please Severus, let's continue the dueling club. Seal, come with me to the headmaster's room. Dumbledore comforted the ramblings present. The little wizards left with Seal. But Professor McGonagall didn't leave. Although he trusted Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall was really afraid of Shire's situation again, so Professor McGonagall decided to stay on the scene to take care of him. It is good. Snape obviously had no problem with Professor McGonagall staying at the scene. He glanced at Professor McGonagall, then directly took over the command of Lockhart and started the pairings of the little wizards. For a time, the field was very lively. Although everyone couldn't get the full effect of special effects like Seal and Snape, normal counter-shooting was still possible. Of course, the final result may still be real, after all. The magic power of this age really can't use so many magic spells. Of course, all of this has nothing to do with Seal. At this time, Seal was frantically complaining about Dumbledore and Snape in the headmaster's room. To ask the reason, of course, it is the question of Snape's dead hand. At first, Seal hadn't reacted. He really believed Dumbledore's nonsense. He really thought it was some kind of test, but on the way to the principal's office, Seal slowly thought about it. What kind of test? It was just an excuse for Bordeaux to deal with everyone. If it was really a test, Snape wouldn't have said something to Seal at the beginning to see how good Seal was. On the other hand, Seal felt that he was so aggrieved. He was beaten up, but he was given a test by Dumbledore. So after the two entered the headmaster's room, Seal started talking trash and complaining frantically about Snape and his own teacher's indifference. Of course, what made Seal most wronged was that he clearly didn't provoke Snape. General, at most it's just not touching bugs in potions class. Of course, Ciel's crazy output didn't bother old Dang. Dumbledore completely ignored Ciel's crazy output, calmly returned to his position, took out a crystal ball from under the table, waved his wand, and the crystal in the ball, the scene of the dueling club appeared. Getting along with Ciel has made Dumbledore understand one thing. According to Ciel's salty fish character, when Ciel enters a state of violent trash talk, ignore him and let him scold him for a while and then he will stop. Ciel, then I don't know when it will be, and if I don't get something good from myself to go back, it is absolutely impossible for Ciel to stop. Ciel spat out trash for a while, and when he saw Dumbledore ignoring him, he felt bored and stopped. After calming down, Ciel saw the crystal ball on the table. Driven by curiosity, Ciel also trotted closer to take a look. In the crystal ball, Harry was talking Parseltongue to Malfoy's Viper. Seeing this scene, Ciel sat down on the chair opposite Dumbledore with some doubts, watching the teacher opposite him watching the scene inside the crystal ball with relish. Ciel felt a bit of drama for a moment, even a little bit. Doubt life. Are you in the world of Harry Potter, an English novel? So it feels like the person sitting opposite is the third generation who can't do anything and kill the first place in his family. Aren't these two alike? Dumbledore doesn't smoke, does he? Ciel wondered for a while, touched his wand, and gave the little candy in front of him a transfiguration technique. Well, it was magic, not ninjutsu, and Ciel did it with peace of mind. Afterwards, Ciel began to look at the energetic old man opposite him with contempt, regardless of whether the old man was bent or straight. As long as he used a crystal ball to do the same thing as the third generation, he should despise him first. Dumbledore didn't care about Ciel's contempt. Until after Snape dispelled the poisonous snake and ended the farce, Dumbledore was content with the crystal ball in his hand. After doing all this, Dumbledore realized that Ciel had quieted down at this time, and he wondered why this kid was so quiet today. When he looked up, he saw Ciel using a pair of Dumbledore I didn't expect you to be. Lego looked at himself with an expression on his face. The mature Dumbledore immediately understood why Ciel looked at him like this, and shook his head with a smile. I want to say, this is the permission of the headmaster, and can only see the classroom. Do you believe it? Hearing Dumbledore's, Charles sneered, "What do you think?" Chapter 99 _ The curtain opens. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal rolled his eyes. "What do you say? What can I say if you are the headmaster?" Seeing Seal's apparent disbelief, Dumbledore didn't intend to explain too much, but shook his head helplessly, then changed to a more comfortable position and looked at Seal. "Don't you have anything to ask me?" Dumbledore said this to Seal with a smile. Charles had also calmed down at this time, and he lowered his head to think for a while when he heard Dumbledore's words, and then raised his head to ask the crux of the problem. "Professor Snape is obviously abnormal today. What is the reason for targeting me? There should be no conflict between the two." Hearing Seal's question, Dumbledore smiled reassuringly. Seal was still very smart when he was normal, but when he was up, he was annoying and very rogue. "It's very simple. My plan needs his help, and your 4 children are the center of the plan. He is more cautious, so he gave you a small test." Dumbledore replied with a smile. "You call this a test?" Seal looked at the old man opposite with a black question mark on his face, and complained mercilessly. "Okay, I admit, it's a little over the top, but the result is good. Snape has agreed to help us." Dumbledore didn't explain too much, and the expression on his face was just 4 words in Seal's opinion. Unfathomable. "Okay, then can you tell me what the plan is? It's still related to me. I remember that I was an assistant in your savior training plan." Seal didn't bother too much, and directly apportioned to his teacher. Seeing that Seal began to act like a rogue again, Dumbledore smiled and shook his head. "It's not yet time, Seal. It can only be said that it is a plan related to the future of the entire magical world. It's not time yet." Dumbledore did not directly choose to tell Seal the plan, but when Seal looked at Dumbledore, he always felt that the old man on the opposite side was planning something huge, even unimaginable. Therefore, Seal chose not to ask too much. The decisions of the upper-level people are often beyond the imagination of the lower-level people who are still a student. "Okay, teacher, let me know if you need help, but never again such a sudden attack." "Absolutely not," Seal said to Dumbledore very seriously. "A little temper. After all, no one can stand a life-and-death battle if nothing is wrong. The key is to have to fight." Hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore smiled even more happily. "Don't worry, Seal, there is no next time, and I don't need your help. What you have to do now is to improve your magic power and make yourself stronger. Now even if you master the elements of the 3 elements, you are still too weak. You need to be stronger." Quote. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal rolled his eyes. "Teacher, I will try my best." Of course, when he said his best, Seal felt helpless in his heart. He was dealt with, and his age was a problem, not to mention that elemental magic was a big monoman. In the past, elemental magicians were not as young as Seal. When Dumbledore heard Seal's words, he didn't say much, but only encouraged him, meaning that Seal should keep working hard, and there would still be many things for Seal to accomplish in the future. Seal didn't say much, just nodded in agreement, and then got up to leave and go back to the dormitory to rest. Just as Seal got up, Dumbledore stopped Seal, and Seal turned around in confusion and looked at his old urchin teacher who was wondering what he was doing. Dumbledore happily pointed to the letter at hand. "This is the letter your mother sent me." Now it was Seal's turn to be nervous, and the memory of being beaten when he returned home from the various parent-teacher meetings in his previous life immediately flooded into Seal's mind. In an instant, Charles turned into a face like a traitor, and leaned over to Dumbledore flatteringly. "Teacher, you didn't say anything, did you?" Seeing Seal's appearance, Dumbledore was also amused for a while, but he didn't say anything, just shook his head calmly. "I didn't say anything. I just asked about the summer vacation arrangements. It seems that you will have a wonderful summer vacation this summer." Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal was instantly refreshed, and it seemed that he didn't need to rest this summer. Seal thought about it carefully, and suddenly remembered that he and the Hermione family had agreed to go to France during the summer vacation of the first year. However, He had no choice but to be beaten by Dumbledore at Grindelwald's all-summer vacation, and the play plan was forced to cancel. It is estimated that the souvenirs brought back from the last time Dumbledore went to France again aroused the idea of the two families. "Are you going to France?" Charles asked his teacher cautiously. Dumbledore glanced at Seal in surprise, then smiled and answered Ciel's question. "Yes, you guessed it. Oh yes, I have a surprise for you in France." When Charles heard Dumbledore's answer, he was happy in the first half, but frightened in the second half. Dumbledore's surprise was not necessarily a surprise. "Teacher, don't scare me, can you tell me what the surprise is?" Charles was trembling a little now. It was a trip with his family. "If there was a surprise like today, it is estimated that my mother can rush to the roadside shop to make a dirt bomb and rush to the enemy's limit one by one." Thinking of this, Seal shuddered and looked at Dumbledore very seriously. "Teacher, don't do anything. Don't do anything. You know my mother, maybe she can really hold a weapon. Go up and change." Hearing Ciel's words, Dumbledore was obviously stunned for a moment, then he laughed and said to Ciel, "Don't worry, it's not a fright, you don't need to prepare anything, just bring your wand." Seeing Dumbledore's expression that he didn't intend to tell him, Ciel gritted his teeth and could only believe Dumbledore's nonsense. He didn't say much, and turned to leave. When Ciel walked to the gate, he suddenly remembered something and stopped at the gate, turned to Dumbledore and said, "Teacher, did you know that you really looked like the White Devil in the tabloid?" After speaking, without waiting for Dumbledore to respond, he quickly opened the door and slipped away. Dumbledore was stunned when he heard Ciel's words, then shook his head and said nothing. Leaning on the back of his chair, the Elder Wand in his hand drew an irregular trajectory and muttered to himself, "The White Devil. Maybe in the eyes of those people I'm really a devil, right, Fox?" Fox glanced at Dumbledore, who was talking to himself, and ignored him, and began to force his eyes to sleep again. The fire in the fireplace swaggered on Dumbledore's face, and the other half of his face was perfectly hidden in the shadows. "Down." Dumbledore frowned slightly, as if he had remembered something. "There has been no news for a week, and I don't know if the experiment in the Far East was successful." Chapter 100 Harry. I have to say that rumors spread really fast. Harry and Hermione haven't come back from the classroom for a while. Now the whole school knows that Harry can speak Slytherin's Parseltongue, and Seal is returning. On the way to the dormitory, everyone was frantically discussing this matter. When Seal returned to the dormitory, Harry and the others had already returned. Of course, because of Harry's excellent performance in the dueling club, what was presented to Seal was that the trio was completely isolated. As if the three of them were some kind of beasts, they kept their distance from them, so that wherever they walked, there was an absolute vacuum area around them. Seeing this situation, Seal was very happy. At least no one was competing with him for a seat near the fireplace, so Seal happily greeted the three of them. "Hey, Harry, I heard that you were chosen as the heir of the Chamber of Secrets." Seal greeted the three of them without hesitation. Hearing Ciel's ridicule, Harry's face suddenly became not so happy. I'm not, don't talk nonsense." Harry turned to Seal and used 3 denials. "Come on, look at it, it's actually pretty good now, at least no one dares to provoke you. Then again, do you want to scare the Slytherins? What do you say? Slytherin's heir goes to Slytherin to rest. Room should be normal, right?" After Seal walked in, Harry, who had a bitter look on his face, couldn't help but tease. "Charles." Hermione stopped Ciel's ridicule in a timely manner after hearing what Seal said, and took good care of Harry's crying expression next to him. However, Ron's eyes lit up instantly after hearing Ciel's words, looking eager to try, and even prepared to speak to encourage Harry. Seeing Ron's appearance, Seal hurriedly said, "I'm joking, Ron, don't think about that good thing, let alone according to your guesses, the real heir should still be in Slytherin, I suggest you don't do it." Die. Ron, who was just about to say something to Harry, sat back down when he heard Ciel's words. "Look at it, at least the 4 of us will never run out of seats when we go out together." Seal couldn't help but tease. Of course, in the end, 3 pairs of huge white eyes were exchanged. Hermione, who had rolled her eyes, suddenly remembered something, and whispered to Seal in a mysterious voice, "What's the matter with you and Snape? I think he wants to kill you." After listening to Hermione's question, Seal rolled his eyes at Harry following the formation of the 3, and then said helplessly, "What else could it be? Just like the teacher said, surprise exam. Don't worry, it's all right." Although he said that, he couldn't help but scolded in his heart, and it wasn't because of the 4-eyed boy on the opposite side. Seal's heart roared wildly. The determined Seal decided that he must take revenge on Snape in the future. There is no end to this, and he must take revenge on Harry the last time. Hearing Seal's answer, Hermione looked at Seal in confusion for a while, thought for a while but didn't say anything, but Harry, who was not in a high mood, suddenly became emotionally high, and pulled the 3 of Seal in a low voice. The start of asking about the preparation of compound decoction. Seeing Harry's sudden surge of emotions, Seal was interrupted by Hermione before he could react to the sudden change. The little girl was still very smart. Taking advantage of the fight just now, she went directly to a girl in Slytherin. "Got a hair." Seal said that he didn't want to take part in the action, so he would just take it as a response, so under the plan of the 3, he was ready to implement the plan on the weekend. Harry excitedly said that he absolutely had to prove that he was definitely not an heir. Of course, the best way to prove himself was to catch the real heir. When Charles heard Harry's words, he always felt something was wrong, but he didn't know what was wrong, and he always felt a little awkward, but he didn't know what was wrong. So he shook his head helplessly, went back to rest, and called him when the matter was in action. Time passed by in a hurry, and in a blink of an eye, the weekend was coming. In the past few days, Charles really loved this kind of undisturbed happy life. There was no need to grab a seat, no need to occupy a seat in advance, and he could even be arrogant to Harry. Taking it out from behind as a weapon against the crowd, even the number of people in the Defense Against the Dark Arts self-study group he organized decreased. Seal, who was suffering from lazy cancer, directly disbanded the group teaching. It can be said that Seal has been very comfortable with Harry's east wind these days, especially the group affairs. Although Hermione felt a little sorry for everyone, Seal looked at him. The group with only a few people left, after hesitating for a second between just teaching Hermione and adding a few more people, they chose the former directly. The 4 of them agreed on Friday night and decided to do it on Saturday afternoon. Because Charles was going to make up lessons in Dumbledore in the morning, the 4 decided to act in the afternoon. Of course, the only thing that makes Seal feel unrealistic is Harry and Ron's plan to deal with Crabbe and Goyle. This is the real world. Who would eat food of unknown origin floating in the hallway? For this reason, Seal has been opposing such hasty plans by the 2 of them, but they cannot stand their insistence. At noon on Saturday, when Charles came to Myrtle's bathroom for the first time after a morning of beatings, Harry and Ron were struggling to support the chubby Crabbe and Goyle into the compartment. This scene made Seal's eyes almost pop out. He always felt that he missed some classic scenes. Looking at the laborious 2 people, Seal couldn't bear to be curious, and asked Hermione, who was doing the final configuration work by the side. How did they do it? When Hermione heard Seal's question, she rolled her eyes and answered helplessly. "According to the plan, I made 2 cakes with the water of life and death, and then Harry used the floating charm to make the cakes float in the corridor they passed by, and then Crabbe and Goyle ate it, and then there is the situation." Hearing Hermione's answer, Seal felt that it was too magical, and pinched his thigh hard. It hurt a lot, but the current picture really made Seal doubt life. Seeing that Seal looked bad, Hermione put down the prepared potion and came over and patted Seal on the shoulder, comforting, "I also think it's magical, but it's the truth, just get used to it. Maybe that's the reality." After he finished speaking, he gave Charles a hug that was associated with a common problem. Then he went back to the place where he was going to transform, leaving Seal alone to doubt life. When the 3 of them drank the compound decoction in the toilet cubicle, Seal still did not recover, but when he saw Crabbe, who was wearing glasses and his clothes were obviously smaller than N, came out. Seal still accepted the reality. But Hermione seemed to have a problem and refused to come out for a long time. Finally, Seal sent the two to go to the Slytherin lounge quickly, and stayed to take care of Hermione before leaving with confidence.